Stop. Do not scroll. Look at me right now. I know you almost kept moving. I know the pull of distraction is strong and there are 1,000 other things competing for your attention in this moment. But I place this message directly in your path today, and that is not a phrase I use lightly. I arranged this. Every thread that had to align for you to see this at exactly this moment, I wove together. This landing was not an accident, and I need you to feel that before anything else is said. So when I tell you to stop, I am not speaking casually. I am telling you that what you are about to hear matters more than whatever else you were about to return to. The timing of this, the specific day, the specific point in your life where this arrived, it is not random, it is deliberate. I need you to treat it that way. I need to talk to you, not in the way that words get spoken and forgotten before the day ends. I mean, I need to sit with you right here in this message and say something to you that I have been waiting to say. There are things that have been building in your life for a long time, things you have tried to address, tried to fix, tried to pray through, tried to carry and release, and still they remain. Not because you lack faith, not because you are less than worthy of what you believe for, but because there is something you do not know yet, something that has been operating beneath the surface of every effort you have made, quietly shaping what is possible and what is not. Something I am here to name today, before tomorrow arrives and the window closes. You made a mistake, and I need you to hear what comes next before you react to those 4 words, because the first thing your mind did when it heard that phrase was reach for a list. I know, I saw it happen. You went somewhere specific, a decision, a relationship, a season, a night, a choice that has lived in you as quiet regret. You have been holding that thing, whatever it is, and wondering if I have been holding it too. I need you to set that thought aside for a moment, because the mistake I have come to speak to you about today is not on your list. It is something else entirely. Something you have never been told, something that has been operating in your life without your awareness, and something that can be corrected. Before tomorrow arrives, I am going to show you exactly what it is and exactly what to do about it. Before tomorrow arrives, I need you to sit with those 3 words. I did not say before the end of the year. I did not say in the next season, or the next chapter, or when you finally feel ready. I said before tomorrow arrives, because tomorrow is not a vague reference in this moment. For you, tomorrow is specific. It is a threshold. It is the line between a pattern continuing and a pattern ending, and which side of that line you land on depends entirely on what you receive in the next few minutes. That is not an exaggeration. That is the weight of what I am carrying into this conversation, and I did not arrange your path here today to watch you scroll past what I came to give you. If you can feel these words reaching something in you right now, if there is a recognition underneath them even before the full meaning has formed, do one thing. Comment the word Amen. Not for me, not for anyone watching, but because I know you have a habit of letting things reach your mind without letting them reach your heart. Amen marks this moment as real, as yours, as the one you are going to look back on as the day the turning happened. Now let me tell you what I see when I look at you. Because I do not see what you see when you look at yourself. You look at yourself and you see everything that should be further along by now. You see the prayers still waiting for visible answers. You see the plans that gathered momentum and then somehow stalled. You see the version of yourself you have been believing toward, and you see the distance between that version and where you are standing today. And some days that distance feels like evidence of something you would rather not name. I know what that inventory feels like from the inside. I have watched you take it, some days quietly, almost without realizing you were doing it, some days with a grief so sharp it surprised you, some days in the middle of the night when the house was still and you lay there in the dark wondering why, after everything, the gap kept being there. I was in the room on every one of those nights, not distant, not withholding, present, watching, and working something on your behalf that you could not yet see. But when I look at you, I do not see that inventory. I see a silent survivor, someone who has been carrying weight that was never entirely theirs to carry, someone whose inner life is far richer and more vast than the results on the outside have reflected. I see someone who has been fighting with incomplete equipment, running a race with something missing that no one named and no one showed them how to restore. The mistake I'm going to tell you about today is not a sin. It is not a failure of character or devotion or will. It is a deficit. Something that was present in full measure when I first formed you, and something that began to diminish as the years went on and the world did what the world does to every child it touches. Something was subtracted from you, without your permission, without your knowledge, without anyone intending it, and the subtraction reached into every area of your life, including the areas where you have worked hardest and believed most deeply and still felt the ceiling. It touched the way you process what you learn. It touched the way you retain ideas, the way you solve problems, the way you create, the way you build toward what you believe for. Everything you have tried to improve through discipline and prayer and sheer will has been operating on top of a foundation with a layer missing, and nothing built on an incomplete foundation can fully become what it was designed to be. That is not a verdict on you. That is a description of conditions that can change. I know something in you wants to resist that framing, because if what I am describing is true, it raises a question. What else was possible? What did I miss? What might have been different? I am not asking you to sit in that grief. I am pointing you toward the answer, because the answer is the most hopeful thing I can give you today. What was possible before is still possible now. Nothing I designed for you expires. I do not place a calling in a life and then withdraw it because of a delay I allowed. What was lost can be restored. That is not inspiration. That is the specific thing I came here to show you. But restoration requires a step, and that step I need you to take before tomorrow arrives. Not next week, not after more thought, before tomorrow. In what follows, I am going to explain exactly what was taken from you, how it happened, and how you recover it, not in language that sounds powerful and dissolves before morning. In a way that makes complete sense and gives you something real to do. Stay with me, my chosen child. Whatever pulled at you before this moment, it can wait. You are not here by accident. The restlessness you felt before finding this, that quiet sense that something was almost about to shift, that was my preparation working in you before the words arrived. Come closer. There is a mistake I need to name. There is a weight I need to lift from your understanding. And there is something specific I need you to do before tomorrow arrives that will change the shape of everything that follows. I have your attention now. That is all I needed first. What comes next is already prepared. I want to speak to you now in a different register. I am stepping closer. You have heard the urgency. You have heard the gravity of what is coming. Now let me speak the way I speak when I sit beside someone and want them to feel they are not alone in what they carry. Let me speak the way I speak in the quiet places, in the places where pretending is not possible and the real weight of a life becomes visible without anything covering it. I have been watching you, my child, not as an observer from a distance. Watching is not strong enough a word for what I do. I have been present, inside every moment that no one else had access to. Inside the parts of your day that you perform for the world, and inside the parts that happen when the performance is over and you close the door and the quiet of being only yourself settles in around you. I saw you in the early hours when the weight of what is unresolved arrived before you were ready for it. I saw the way you lay still, not sleeping, running through the same thoughts you ran through the night before, hoping that this time the path through them would look different. It rarely did. And I watched you gather yourself anyway, get up anyway, show up for the people depending on you anyway. Every single morning that required more than you had when it began, I watched you give it. I saw you in the middle of conversations where you were saying the right things while something inside felt entirely absent from the words. I've seen you laugh with people around you and feel, in the same moment, like the most alone person in the room, not because you did not love them, but because something in you was not able to fully land in the joy of the moment. Something kept a thin layer of distance between you and the experiences that should have felt like enough, and you could not understand why the distance was there, and so you stopped trying to explain it, even to yourself. I saw you in the moments of hoping, the moments just before an answer came, and you held your breath and believed with everything in you that this time would be different. I saw what it cost you in those seconds to be that open, that vulnerable to the outcome, and I saw what happened when the result came back the same. I watched you absorb it without collapsing. I watched you keep going, not because you were unaffected, because stopping was not something you allowed yourself to consider. I saw you in the ordinary days that were sometimes the hardest. Not the big losses, but the quiet afternoons where nothing was technically wrong and yet nothing felt right and you could not name what was missing, and that inability to name it was its own specific kind of grief. I was there in those unnamed days. I have never looked away from any version of you, the strong one, the exhausted one, the one that sat in the silence at the end of something and did not have words for what it was sitting in. I know what the buried question has cost you, because burying a question does not make it go away. It goes underground and becomes a current running beneath everything else, a low and constant thing, a hum of wondering whether there is something different about you, something that makes breakthrough available to others in a way it has not been available to you despite your faith and your effort. I want you to understand something about that question right now. It is not evidence of weak faith. It is not ingratitude. It is the most honest and accurate question you have been asking, because the answer to it is the exact thing I came here to give you today. There is something different about your situation, not about your worth, not about your standing with me. I want to be very careful here, because I do not want you to take what I am saying somewhere it does not belong. The difference is not in who you are. It is in what you have been working with. The capacity that was given to you at the beginning and the capacity that has been available to you in recent years, those are not the same thing. Something changed. Something was taken. And you have been operating in that diminished state for so long that the reduced version started to feel like your true ceiling. That ceiling is not yours. It was placed there, and what was placed can be removed. I need you to stay with that for a moment rather than moving past it. The ceiling that has defined the outer limit of your results, the one you have been pressing against and praying against and working against for years, it does not belong to you. It was introduced, and I do not allow what was introduced against my design to remain permanent, not when there is a step available, and there is a step. I'm going to give it to you before this day ends. I want to tell you what I call you when I look at you, not the role the world has assigned, not the name that comes with your responsibilities. I call you a silent survivor, the one who holds everything together from the outside while something on the inside has been quietly wearing down through the years, the one who has learned how to be strong for others because the cost of letting people see the full weight would only add more to the load. I know that person better than they know themselves, and I did not make that person for a life that stays at endurance level. I made them for something that looks entirely different from this. Let me name the weight that you have been carrying that has no single word for it. Not the grief of specific losses, though those have been real too. The everyday weight of doing your best and still feeling the gap, of praying sincerely and still lying awake, of starting with genuine intention and watching the momentum slow before what you believed became what you were holding, of wondering, quietly, whether something in you was fundamentally working against the outcomes you were trying to build toward. You have carried that weight without putting it down, and you have kept going. That is not a small thing. But endurance was not my design for you. Flourishing was, and the gap between what you were formed to experience and what has been available to you, that is the mistake I need to explain today. Not a mistake you made, a mistake that was made against you. Something that happened in the space between who I created you to be and what the years have left available to that person. You have applied yourself. You have prayed and believed and tried again. When change came slowly, you gave more. That persistence is not the problem. It is the proof that you know at the deepest level that you were made for more than what the evidence has shown. I put that knowing in you on purpose, because it is true, and I am here today to close the gap between that truth and your experience of it. If something in what I have said is landing somewhere specific in your chest right now, type the word yes in the comments below, not as a ritual, but as a marker. Let today be the day you mark as the one where someone finally spoke the true thing about what you have been carrying and why, and what is about to change because of one conversation and one step that is coming. Stay with me. The mistake is not yet fully named. The step is not yet revealed, but both are close. And when they arrive, everything that has felt like a personal limitation, a ceiling built into who you are, will begin to look like exactly what it is. Not permanent, not yours. A condition introduced from outside, and a condition that can be ended before tomorrow arrives. Let me go deeper now, because what I have been building toward in the first part of this conversation is not the full story. It is the foundation for what needs to be said next. And what needs to be said next is something that most messages you have encountered will have stopped short of. They will have given you the comfort without the explanation, the peace without the understanding, the reassurance that you are loved without the specific information about what has been working against you and why. I am not going to do that today. I came here to give you the real thing, not just the feeling of being seen, though I do see you, completely and without condition. but the actual understanding of what has been happening beneath the visible surface of your life. Because feeling seen without understanding does not change anything by tomorrow. And I told you, before tomorrow arrives, something in your life is going to change. Let me tell you about the years you were brilliant, because there were years. There was a version of you that moved through the world differently than the version that has been showing up lately. Do you remember what it felt like to learn something quickly, to feel the pieces of a new idea snap into place before anyone else in the room had even found the first edge? Do you remember what it felt like to create something that surprised even you? To start with nothing and find yourself holding something that had not existed an hour before? That was not a different person. That was you, at a different level of function. That was you, with access to something that has since become harder to reach. And I want you to hear very clearly that what has happened between then and now is not aging, is not the inevitable cost of time, is not what happens to everyone and must simply be accepted. What happened is specific. It has a name, and it can be reversed. You may have noticed that the pace of learning has changed, that ideas that would have come quickly now seem to require more effort to pull from beneath the surface, that the creative energy that once felt like something you could access freely has become something you have to work for, and sometimes even then, it does not come the way it used to. You may have wondered at some point whether something had shifted, whether the sharpness you remembered was simply gone, whether what you experienced in those earlier years was a peak you had already passed without realizing it. I want to speak directly to that wonder. That wondering was not paranoia. It was not ingratitude for what you still have. It was an accurate perception of something real. Something did shift. And the reason it shifted is the reason I am here today, because what happened to you is not supposed to be permanent, and most people live their entire lives not knowing it can be undone. Here is what I know about the way I made you. I made you to be whole, not half of what you were capable of, not divided, not operating in separate compartments, one part of your thinking doing one kind of work and another part doing a different kind of work without the two regions ever fully collaborating. I made you to think and create and learn and build with the full architecture of the mind I designed, with both halves working in coordination, sharing information, multiplying capacity. That is what whole function looks like, and that is what you had at the beginning. The world has a way of narrowing that. School narrows it, routine narrows it, stress narrows it. The pressure to produce in specific, measurable ways narrows it. Decade by decade, the breadth of operation that was available to you in those early years gets reduced. And most people do not notice when it happens, because the narrowing is gradual. It does not arrive as a single event. It accumulates. Until the day comes when the version of yourself that is operating now and the version that was operating in those earlier years are so different that looking back feels like looking at someone else. That is the deficit I am naming for you, not a moral failing, not a spiritual consequence, a functional reduction in the full scope of what I gave you, caused by the accumulation of exactly the conditions that make up an ordinary modern life. And I am naming it today because I am also about to tell you that it is not a one-way door. What was reduced, what was narrowed, what was shifted from full operation to partial operation, that can be restored. The architecture is still there. The design is intact. What is missing is the signal that brings both halves back into active collaboration. I want you to feel the significance of that. The design is intact. I do not build things I intended to have their best years in childhood and then spend the rest of a lifetime operating at diminished capacity. That was never what I designed. The fullness of what I gave you is not a memory. It is a dormant state, not gone, not used up, waiting for the right signal to wake up. Before tomorrow arrives, I'm going to tell you what that signal is. I'm going to explain exactly how it works, exactly why it works, and exactly where you can access it. Not to give you something new to try in a long list of things you have already tried. This is different in kind, not just in degree, and the difference matters. It matters for what happens tomorrow and for every day that follows it. I want to sit with you in something for a moment, because there is a feeling that belongs specifically to this conversation, to this point in what I am saying, and I want to name it before it passes. It is the feeling of something that has always been true about your situation becoming, for the first time, speakable, nameable. Not just a fog of frustration or a vague sense that things should be different, but an actual explanation. The first solid ground you have had under a question that has been liquid for a long time. That feeling is not your imagination, it is recognition. And recognition is different from hope. Hope is reaching towards something you are not sure is there. Recognition is landing in something you already knew at a level deeper than words. What I am telling you today, you have sensed on some level for a long time. You have felt the edges of it in the gap between your effort and your outcomes. You have almost touched it in the moments where something in you reached for a capacity that was almost there and then just slightly out of reach. Today I am naming the thing you have been sensing, and naming it is the first step toward ending it. I want to say one more thing in this part of our conversation before I take you further. I want to say it clearly, and I want you to let it land. The years of struggle you have been through were not wasted. I know how it might look from the inside of them. I know how the accumulation of effort that did not produce the expected result can start to feel like a record of failure rather than a record of faithfulness. But I see it differently. Every year you persisted under conditions that were working against you. Every year you showed up for your life despite the invisible limitation that was narrowing your access to your own capacity. Those years were not lost. They were forming something in you that could not have been formed any other way. Depth does not come from ease, and what is coming next requires the depth you have built. Let me tell you something about the pain you have been in, because there is a specific kind of pain that belongs to people like you. People who are aware enough to know that something is not right, who are close enough to their own potential to feel the gap between what is present and what should be present, but who have not had the language or the information to explain it to themselves or to anyone else. That pain is lonelier than the pain of not knowing. It is the pain of almost knowing, of sensing the truth without being able to grasp it. I place this message in your path today because that pain is ending, not gradually, today, in this conversation. Before tomorrow arrives, the explanation you have been sitting without is about to be given. And with the explanation comes the step. And with the step comes what has been waiting on the other side of it. You have been one step away from something for longer than you know. That step is what this entire conversation has been building toward. I need to take you somewhere now, somewhere specific. I want to take you back through time, not to a place of regret, but to a place of recognition. Because what I am about to say requires you to be able to see yourself at a different stage of your life, in a different condition, with access to something that has since become harder to reach. And I need you to be able to feel the difference between then and now, not as a loss to mourn, but as a description of something that is about to change. Think about the years when learning felt like something your mind reached toward, rather than something you had to drag yourself through. I do not mean the absence of difficulty. I mean the quality of engagement when you were inside something that interested you, the way ideas seemed to connect before you had consciously finished pursuing them, the way a new piece of information would land and immediately begin weaving itself into everything else you already knew. That was not a version of you that no longer exists. It was a version of you that was operating at a level of neural integration that has since been reduced. And the reduction has been so gradual, so unremarkable in its individual moments, that most people do not notice it happening. They only notice the result. They only notice that something that once felt available now requires more effort, that something that once felt natural now feels like something they have to pursue. And most people explain that to themselves by concluding that they have simply gotten older, that this is what happens, that the sharpness of the earlier years was a gift of youth and not something that belongs to them anymore. I am here to tell you that explanation is wrong. The sharpness did not leave because you aged. It left because something specific happened to the architecture of your thinking, something that happens to nearly everyone who passes through the conditions of modern life, but something that is neither inevitable nor permanent. The architecture itself is still there, fully intact. What changed is the degree to which it is active. What changed is the coordination between the parts of your mind that were built to work together and that have, over time, been allowed to drift apart. The research I am pointing you toward, research that sits at the foundation of some of the most important understanding humans have reached about their own minds, maps this clearly. Children, in the early years, before the narrowing begins, operate with a level of whole brain connectivity that researchers have measured to be extraordinary. Not just above average, extraordinary. Nearly all children in those early years test at what researchers describe as creative genius levels. The full architecture is engaged. Both hemispheres are actively collaborating, sharing information, multiplying the range of what a person can perceive, retain, create, and solve. And then the narrowing begins. not dramatically, not in a single event, through the accumulation of ordinary conditions, the pressure to perform in specific and measurable ways, the routine of a system that rewards one kind of thinking and consistently underuses another, the stress that becomes chronic, the noise that becomes constant. All of these things, acting together over years, gradually reduce the active collaboration between the two halves of the mind. And by the time most people reach adulthood, the level of whole brain connectivity they were born with has been reduced significantly. By the time most people are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, the number who still operate at that early level of full integration is not most people. It is not even many people. Research suggests it is fewer than 1 person in 1,000, not because those 999 people are less intelligent or less deserving or less chosen, but because the conditions of their lives, ordinary conditions that they shared with nearly everyone around them, narrowed something that was never designed to be narrow. That is the mistake I am naming for you. Not your mistake. A mistake of conditions. A mistake made by the accumulated weight of a world that does not know how to preserve what was given at the beginning. And the cost of that mistake has been showing up in your life in the gap between what you know you are capable of and what keeps appearing in the results, in the ceiling you have been pressing against. In the unanswered question of why someone with your faith and your commitment and your desire keeps finding the same limit in the way. I want to name something specifically about what it has felt like on the inside of that, because I know what it is to watch someone I made precisely and with enormous purpose spend years wondering why the precision is not showing up in the outcomes. I have watched you apply yourself to the problem. I have watched you read and study and seek and change your habits and change your mindset and change your environment and ask me in prayer and ask other people for wisdom and look for the missing piece in every direction available to you, and I have not been indifferent to that searching. I have been walking beside it. I have been preparing for this moment the entire time. Because there is a way that the right information, arriving before the conditions are ready for it, does not take root the way it is meant to. And the years you have been through, the years of searching and persistence and the particular endurance that belongs to someone who refuses to settle for the ceiling even when the ceiling has not yet moved, those years were the preparation for this, for the information I am about to give you, for the step I am about to offer. I formed you to be the one who breaks what has been holding, not just in your own life, in the lives of everyone watching what your life becomes when the limitation is removed. I formed you to be the visible evidence that the ceiling is not permanent, that what looks like the limit of a person who has been trying is actually the limit of a condition that is about to end. Before tomorrow arrives, that phrase keeps returning because I need you to feel the nearness of what I am describing. This is not a distant promise. It is not something you are moving toward slowly over another decade of effort and faith. It is something available to you now, in the next part of this conversation, before you go to sleep tonight, before tomorrow arrives, with its same conditions and its same ceiling. I am going to give you the step that changes what tomorrow looks like when it gets here. The step is specific. It is not another mindset shift. It is not a new spiritual practice layered on top of what you are already doing. It is something that works at the level where the narrowing happened, at the level of the neural architecture itself, at the place where the collaboration between the two halves of your mind can be restored. I will explain exactly how it works. I will explain exactly why it works in a way that other things you may have tried do not. And I will tell you exactly where to find it before this conversation ends. Stay close. I am taking you there now. What I have given you in this part of our conversation is the description of what was taken. What comes next is the restoration. And restoration, in my hands, does not take years. It takes a step. There is a question that has lived underneath all of this for a long time. A question that belongs to someone who has taken their faith seriously enough to notice when the promises and the experience are not yet lining up. I know you have not always been able to say it out loud, because saying it out loud felt like it might mean something about your faith that you were not ready to examine. But I know it is there. I have heard it in the prayers that started with the right words and then trailed into something unfinished before you even knew why. I have heard it in the silence that followed the questions you did not complete. I want to name it now, because naming it is the beginning of answering it, and the answer is one of the things I came here today to give. The question is this: if you are with me, if you see me, if your love for me and your trust in me is as real as you have lived it, then why has so much of what you have worked toward and prayed toward and believed toward fallen short of what you were certain it could become? Why have you given your best, your consistent best, your honest and persistent and sacrificial best, and still arrived here, still looking at the gap, still pressing against the ceiling that has not moved despite everything you have brought to the effort of moving it? I hear that question, and I need you to know, before I answer it, that I am not offended by it. I am not disappointed in you for having it, or for holding it in, for as long as you have. The question is the honest one. It belongs to someone who took the covenant between us seriously enough to notice when the visible evidence and the invisible promise were not telling the same story. That kind of honesty is not something I punish. It is something I answer, and today is the day I answer it. Here is what I want you to understand about the seasons that felt like silence. I was not absent in those seasons. I was not withholding from you while you were trying. I was not watching you hit the ceiling and thinking to myself that this was the outcome I had planned, that the plateau was the destination. What was happening in the times that felt like nothing was happening is something that required this exact moment to explain fully. Not because I enjoy making you wait for explanations, but because certain truths can only be received when the ground is prepared for them, and the ground was not ready until now. I was preparing something for you, and preparation is the part of the story that is hardest to be inside of, because from inside the preparation, it looks identical to abandonment. From inside the waiting, the silence of what you cannot yet see feels the same as the silence of what is not coming. I know that. I know what it has cost you to keep going in a season that gave you almost nothing to work with in the way of visible evidence that the going was worth it. And I want to tell you something about that cost that I have never been able to say to you until now. Every act of faithfulness in a season that gave you no obvious reason to be faithful was noted. Every prayer that you sent upward when the silence on the way back down could have been enough to stop you from sending another, I received. Every morning you chose to continue when stopping would have been the easier and more understandable choice. I was watching, not as an observer cataloging your performance. As someone who loves you deeply and has been holding a promise over your life that the preparation was required to bring fully into reach. You may have tried things before, and I know that the list of things you have tried is not a list you are proud of in every case, because some of them did not work and the not working became evidence against the hope you had started with. You may have tried things to sharpen the mind, to expand what was available to you, to open what felt closed, binaural tracks, meditation techniques, focus supplements, mindset practices, systems and habits and routines designed by people who had studied the problem and believed they had found a solution. And I want to say something about those attempts that is important. They were not wrong to try. The instinct behind them, the instinct that something could be changed if you could only find the right lever, was accurate. The instinct was right. What was missing was not the willingness to try. What was missing was the right specific thing to try. Because the mechanism I have been describing, the reduction in active collaboration between the two hemispheres of your mind, does not respond to the tools you have been given access to so far. Not because those tools were without value in every sense, but because they do not operate at the level where the narrowing happened. Think about what I am saying carefully. The collaboration between the left and right hemispheres, the degree to which they are actively sharing information and coordinating their distinct kinds of intelligence, is not a function of conscious effort. It is not a habit. It is not a mindset. It is a feature of the neural architecture, something that operates beneath the level of intention, beneath the level of willpower, beneath the level where any of the approaches you have previously tried could reach. This means that no matter how hard you tried, no matter how disciplined you were, no matter how many resources you applied to the problem, the specific thing I am pointing to was not addressable through those approaches. That is not a failure of the approaches in every sense. It is a failure of targeting, and targeting is everything when the problem has a specific location. I have placed something in your path today that is targeted specifically to the location of the problem, not a general wellness tool, not a repackaged version of something you have already encountered. Something built by someone who has spent their professional life studying the architecture of the human mind and who discovered through that study a specific kind of input, a specific kind of auditory signal, that the neural system responds to with exactly the kind of whole brain coordination that was present when you were at your most fully operational. I am not going to name it yet. I am going to name it in the right moment of this conversation, the moment that carries the full context of everything I have been building toward, so that when you receive it with the understanding that allows it to land in the place it is meant to land. because this is not something I want you to half hear at the end of a message you were only partly paying attention to. This is the step I have been preparing you for, and I want you ready to receive it when it arrives. Before we get there, I need to say one more thing in this part of our conversation. I need to say it because the enemy, the one who has been invested in keeping this particular limitation in your life, is already working to discount what I am saying, already composing the internal objections, already reaching for the reasons this will be like everything else you have tried, already constructing the narrative of skepticism that keeps you from taking the step that changes everything. I know that voice. I have heard it in your life before, and I want you to recognize it for what it is, not wisdom, not discernment. It is the specific voice of the one who has the most to lose from you taking this step. Because what I am pointing you toward is not another spiritual concept to add to your library. It is a functional restoration of the tool through which every other truth, every other prayer, every other act of faith operates. When the tool is whole, everything built with it becomes more possible, and the one who has been invested in keeping the tool diminished is not going to quietly yield when the correction arrives. Stay close. Do not let that voice have more authority than this one. What comes next is what all of this has been for. Now I need to go even deeper with you, because there is a layer of this conversation that we have not yet reached, and it is the layer where the real weight lives. We have talked about the gap between what you are capable of and what has been showing up in the results. We have talked about the narrowing, about the reduction in whole brain function that has been the invisible mechanism behind the ceiling you have been pressing against. But there is a dimension of this that I have not yet named, and it is the one that carries the most personal weight for you. It is the dimension that has to do with who you believe yourself to be in the quiet moments, in the moments between the public version of your life and the private one. I want to speak into the private version now, the one that runs a different narration than the one you offer to the world. The private narration that has wondered, at various points and in various forms, whether the gap between what you were made for and what you are currently experiencing is trying to tell you something about your fundamental worthiness of what you have been believing for. I want to name that narration clearly, because it has been one of the most damaging things operating in your life, and it is not true. You are not behind because you are less worthy than the people whose lives seem to be further along. You are not behind because I have decided to favor someone else and withhold from you. You are not behind because there is something wrong with you at the core, some fundamental disqualification that makes what you are believing for available to others but somehow just out of reach for you specifically. None of those explanations are true, and the fact that you have entertained them at various points, not as stated beliefs but as quiet suspicions that arrived in the dark hours, is not evidence of their truth. It is evidence of a voice that knows where to find you when the results are not matching the belief. The enemy has a specific strategy for people like you. I want to name it because I want you to be able to see it for what it is when you encounter it. The strategy is not to come at you with obvious lies that you can easily dismiss. The strategy is to take the real gap, the gap between your capacity and your current output that is genuinely there and that you genuinely feel, and to offer you an explanation for it that points the cause toward something internal, something fixed, something about who you are rather than what is happening to you. That is the strategy. Take a real gap and fill the explanation of it with a lie about your worth. I am replacing that explanation today. The gap is real, and I am telling you what causes it. It is not your worth. It is not your standing with me. It is a functional deficit in the neural architecture, a measurable reduction in the active collaboration of the mind I gave you, and it is something that a specific kind of stimulus has been shown to restore. That is the explanation for the gap, not your inadequacy. Equipment. I also want to speak to something about the particular kind of exhaustion you have been in, because it is not the exhaustion of someone who has not been trying hard enough. It is the exhaustion of someone who has been trying too hard, with too little, for too long. And trying hard with diminished capacity produces a very specific kind of fatigue that is different from ordinary tiredness. It is the fatigue that comes from pushing against a limit from the inside, the fatigue of effort that does not fully convert into result, the fatigue of being repeatedly on the edge of something and having it not quite arrive. That fatigue is real, and I am not asking you to minimize it. I am asking you to understand its source, because when you understand the source, you also understand that the fatigue is not permanent. The fatigue belongs to the condition, not to you. And when the condition is corrected, the fatigue changes. Not all at once, not overnight, but in the way that all genuine fatigue eventually changes when the load that was causing it is reduced, when the gap between the effort required and the capacity available begins to close, when the ceiling that was converting your energy into frustration begins to rise. What I am about to describe to you is what causes the ceiling to rise, not gradually over years of additional effort, but through the restoration of the specific mechanism that determines how much of your mind is actively available to you. And once that mechanism is restored, everything else that you have already been building with discipline and faith and effort begins to compound in the way it was always designed to, because the inputs have not been wrong. The foundation has been incomplete, and a complete foundation changes everything above it. I want you to feel something right now. I want you to feel what it means that this conversation is happening today, not next year, not in another decade of pressing against what has been in the way. Today, before tomorrow arrives, I want you to feel the specific mercy in that timing, the fact that you have been brought to this moment at exactly the right juncture in your story, the fact that what I am about to offer you has arrived at the point in your life where you have developed everything needed to use it well. Because the depth of persistence you have built, the quality of faith that keeps going without full visible evidence, the specific kind of character that gets formed when someone keeps showing up for something they believe in, even when the results are slow to follow, those are not things that develop in comfortable conditions. They develop in exactly the kind of conditions you have been in. And I did not allow those conditions to be what they were because I was indifferent to your difficulty. I allowed them because I knew what they were forming. I knew what you were going to need on the other side of the limitation being removed. The other side of this limitation is where your life is actually designed to take place. The version of tomorrow that is available to you after you take the step I am about to describe is not a modest improvement on today. It is the beginning of an experience of your own capacity that most people never reach because most people never receive the specific restoration that the limitation requires. You are about to receive it, and what you do with it will be one of the things I designed you from the beginning to do. Hold on to what you are feeling right now, the combination of recognition and anticipation and something that might be cautious hope but is growing towards something more than cautious. That feeling is accurate. What is coming is worth it. What you have been through was not pointless, and what I am about to give you is the thing that makes the entire story, every part of it, the struggle and the persistence and the quiet faith, make sense in a way that it has not been able to make sense yet. We are almost there. I need you to stay with me through what comes next, because what comes next is the naming, and after the naming comes the step, and after the step comes tomorrow, a tomorrow that looks different from any tomorrow you have experienced in a long time. I am going to ask you to do something now that might feel uncomfortable. I am going to ask you to stop protecting yourself from the full weight of what has been true, because I have noticed something about the way people move through hard truths. They receive the edge of it. They let themselves feel the outline of a painful thing without fully sitting down inside it, and then they move toward the hopeful part before the honest part has had time to do what it was meant to do. I do not want you to do that with what I have been saying. I want you to let the full truth of it land. The years that you have been operating with diminished capacity. The effort that you have been bringing to a situation that the effort alone could not fix. The prayers that were genuine and sincere and well-placed, and that were going up from a person whose own ability to receive and implement the answers to those prayers was operating below the level I had originally designed it to operate at. Let yourself feel what it means that this has been the situation, not to punish yourself with it, but to let the honest weight of it crack something open in you that can then be filled with what I have come to give. I saw you trying to make things make sense. I saw the frameworks you built to explain why things were moving slowly, the spiritual frameworks, the mindset frameworks, the personal development frameworks. You tried to find the organizing principle that would make the plateau understandable, that would give you a way to hold the gap without it feeling like an indictment. And some of those frameworks gave you genuine things: patience, perspective, the ability to keep going without being destroyed by what was not yet arriving. I honor every piece of wisdom you gathered in those seasons. It was not wasted. But frameworks that explain a limitation are not the same as frameworks that end one. And what I have come with today is not another way to understand why things have been the way they have been. It is the mechanism by which what has been true stops being true. The explanation and the step together, understanding paired with action, and the action, the specific step I am about to give you, is one that operates at the level where the problem has always actually lived. Let me tell you what the deepest layer of the pain looks like, because I know there is a version of it that you have never said to anyone, that you have barely said to yourself, that lives in the very private interior, where you hold the things that feel too tender to expose. The deepest layer is not the frustration of the gap. It is the creeping fear that the gap is evidence, that it is trying to tell you something about the ceiling of what is possible for you specifically, as opposed to what is possible for people in general. The fear that your story might already be as far along as it is going to get. The fear that what you have been calling a season of waiting is actually just your life, and that the version of it you have been believing toward is a version that was always more aspiration than actual future. That fear, in the moments it surfaces, is the sharpest thing. Not the plateau itself, but the possibility that the plateau is permanent. I want to meet you there, in that specific place, because it is the place that has required the most courage to keep holding faith from. And I want to say to you, from that place, the thing I have come today to say to you from every place you have been through. The ceiling is not yours. The ceiling belongs to the limitation, and the limitation is about to end, not metaphorically, not spiritually, in a way that requires you to wait another 5 years for visible evidence. Specifically, mechanically, in a way that works at the level where the problem lives, which is the level below all the effort you have already been applying and which those efforts were never designed to reach, today, before tomorrow arrives. I want to tell you about something that happened when I was first forming you, before the world touched you, before the years added their weight, before the narrowing began. There was a moment when everything I had placed inside you was fully present and fully accessible. The full breadth of your capacity was awake. The full collaboration of the two hemispheres of your mind was active, and what was available to you in that moment was not what has been available to you in the years since. It was wider, it was more connected. It was more capable of the reaches that produce the things you have been believing for. I want you to know that what was present in that moment did not leave. It became quieter. It became less accessible. The pathways that connected the two sides of what I gave you became less trafficked, less active, less engaged in the continuous exchange that produces the kind of thinking and creating and building that you felt available to you in the earlier years. But the pathways are still there. The architecture is intact. What is needed is the signal that restores the traffic, the specific kind of input that the neural system responds to with the activation of exactly what was present at the beginning. That signal exists. A neurologist who spent his career studying this specific question found it, not a spiritual concept, but a measurable, testable, reproducible finding. An auditory sequence of a specific kind that, when the mind is exposed to it in the right conditions, stimulates both hemispheres simultaneously and initiates the kind of whole brain coordination that was present in those early years. Not by a gradual process of rewiring over months, not by a discipline requiring daily practice for a year before any result is visible, within a period that I think will surprise you. There is something I want to say about the word unforgivable in the title of this conversation, because I know that word may have arrived in you as a verdict, as something final, as the kind of language that does not leave room for recovery or restoration, and I want to address that directly, because the way I use that word today is not the way it might feel at first encounter. The unforgivable mistake is not unforgivable by me. I forgive everything. The word belongs to what happened to you, not to what you are capable of from this point forward. What happened to you, the quiet narrowing of the fullness I gave you without your knowledge or consent, is the kind of thing that can feel unforgivable when you see the cost of it across the years, the wasted effort, the sincere prayer that did not land the way it should have, the gap that should not have been there. But the naming of it as unforgivable is also an invitation, because the things that feel most unforgivable, when they are finally addressed, produce the most complete and thorough kind of reversal. And what is coming for you on the other side of the step I am about to describe is not a partial improvement. It is the kind of shift that happens when something that has been working against a person at the foundational level is finally removed from the foundation. I am building toward that. I am building toward the specific description of what this is and where you find it. But first I need to finish something I started in the earlier part of this conversation. I told you there was a mistake. I told you the mistake was not what you thought it was. And I have been describing the mistake in increasing levels of specificity throughout everything I have said. I am ready now to name it directly. The mistake that has been made in your life, the unforgivable mistake that I told you I needed to talk to you about, is this. You have been living below your created capacity for years, not because of any failing of your own, but because of a natural process that the conditions of modern life caused in your neural architecture. A process that separated the two halves of your thinking and reduced the active collaboration between them, and that no one named for you, that no tool you were given access to could address, and that you have therefore been carrying as a ceiling, without knowing what the ceiling was made of or that it could be removed. That is the mistake. The unforgivable mistake is a world that allowed what I designed to be whole to become partial, and that did not give you the tool to restore it, until now, until today, before tomorrow arrives. I have been speaking to you in a whisper for most of this conversation, and I need to shift now, not because the tenderness of what I have said is over, but because what comes next requires a different voice. The whispering was for the pain. What follows is for the turning, and turnings speak differently. They arrive with an authority that tenderness alone cannot carry. So if you feel something change in the register of what I am saying next, that is intentional. That is me stepping from sitting beside you into standing before you, from offering comfort into offering declaration. You have heard me whisper peace over your pain. Now hear me declare your freedom. The season that has confined you is ending. I want you to hear that not as a hopeful statement waiting to be verified by future circumstances. I want you to hear it as a declaration about something that is already in motion, that has already been authorized, that is not waiting on anything other than the step I am about to give you. The ceiling that has defined the outer edge of your results is not permanent. The narrowing that happened to the architecture of your mind over the course of the years since childhood is not irreversible. I am removing it, not gradually. Now, what I have been building toward in this entire conversation is a single specific thing, not a new belief, not a new mindset, not a new way of understanding why the gap has been there. A specific restoration of the precise mechanism that has been causing the gap, and the restoration is available to you before tomorrow arrives, not as a future possibility, but as a present step you can take when this conversation gives you the information you need to take it. I am releasing something in your life today, something that has been waiting on the other side of this specific conversation reaching you. The wisdom of what I am about to name did not arrive in your path by accident any more than this message arrived in your path by accident. I arranged it. I placed the research in the hands of the right person. I opened the path that led to the development of what you are about to receive, and I arranged for it to arrive in your awareness at exactly the moment when everything you have been through has prepared you to use it. Here is what I need you to understand about the science I am about to describe. It is not a departure from what I have been saying. It is the physical description of what I have been saying. When I speak of the architecture of your mind, when I speak of the two hemispheres and the collaboration between them and what happens when that collaboration is at its fullest, I am describing something that has been measured, something that researchers have studied under controlled conditions and produced reproducible findings about. The spiritual truth and the scientific truth are pointing at the same thing from different directions. The research I am pointing to begins with the work of a neurologist named Roger Sperry, whose discoveries about the distinct functions of the left and right hemispheres of the brain are foundational to modern neuroscience and earned the highest recognition available in the field of science. What Sperry discovered is that the two hemispheres of the brain are not simply redundant copies of each other. They are distinct in their functions, and they are designed to collaborate. The left hemisphere processes in a sequential, analytical, language-based way. The right hemisphere processes in a parallel, intuitive, pattern recognition way. When they are in full coordination, when the signals moving between them are high, and the collaboration between these two distinct modes of processing is active, the result is a quality of thinking and creating and learning and solving that exceeds what either hemisphere produces alone. This is not a marginal difference. The literature describes the state of full whole brain coordination as qualitatively different from the state of partial operation. The outputs, the ideas, the creative solutions, the speed of learning and retention, the quality of decision-making are in a different category when the full architecture is engaged. And this is what was present at the beginning. This is what researchers have measured in children in the early years. The level of whole brain coordination in very young children is extraordinary compared to what is measured in adults. The capacity for creative genius-level thinking, as measured by the tools researchers have developed for this purpose, is present in nearly every child in the early years. By adulthood, fewer than 1 in 1,000 people retain it. This is what was taken from you. Not your intelligence, not your worthiness, not your capacity for breakthrough, the active, high-level collaboration between the two sides of the mind I gave you. The specific mechanism that multiplies what is available to you from your own neural architecture, the thing that was working at full capacity in those early years and that has been working at reduced capacity for most of the years since. And this is what I am restoring, not through a new spiritual discipline, not through 5 more years of effort against a ceiling that the effort alone cannot move, through something specific, something that operates at exactly the level where the reduction happened. Something designed to give the neural system the precise kind of input it responds to, with the restoration of exactly this kind of whole brain activation. You have been waiting for this, not waiting passively, not in the way that waiting can become resignation, waiting actively, holding on to a belief that things were going to shift, that what felt like the ceiling was going to prove itself to be something less permanent than it appeared. That waiting was accurate. What you were waiting for was not some vague future improvement, it was this. A specific correction applied to a specific mechanism, and the correction is here. I want to say something about the authority with which I am speaking right now. This declaration I am making over your life is not conditional. It is not dependent on you being sufficiently worthy, or sufficiently prepared, or sufficiently without fault. It is the declaration of the one who made you over the life of the one they made, announcing the end of a condition that was never part of the original design. I made you whole. I am restoring whole. That is the declaration. Everything else in this conversation is the pathway to that declaration becoming your experience. The restoration I am describing does not come from trying harder. It does not come from more willpower applied to the same problems in the same ways. It comes from the removal of the specific thing that has been constraining the return on every effort you have already been making. And when the constraint is removed, the efforts do not suddenly need to change. The efforts you have already been making begin to produce what they always had the potential to produce, because the limiting factor has been addressed at the level where it actually lives. Let me tell you what this restoration does to the experience of your life when it begins to take effect, not in abstract terms, in the specific terms of the daily experience of someone who goes from partial whole brain function to full whole brain function. Ideas that require deliberate effort to reach begin arriving without being chased. Connections between things that seemed unrelated become visible before you consciously pursued them. Learning that required repetition begins to stick on first exposure. Creative approaches to problems that have been stuck begin emerging from a place that feels less like effort and more like access. This is not the description of a different person, it is the description of you operating at the level you were designed to operate at. The version of you that pressed against the ceiling for all those years was not the true ceiling. It was the ceiling of a condition. When the condition is corrected, the ceiling rises to where it was always supposed to be. And what you can build from there, with everything you have already been building in terms of faith and discipline and intention, is not comparable to what has been available from below the ceiling. We are arriving now at the place where I name what I have been building toward, the step before tomorrow, the specific thing I need you to do. There is a man whose work I want to tell you about, not because I want this conversation to become a scientific lecture, but because I need you to understand that what I am about to introduce to you is not wishful thinking dressed in spiritual language. It is grounded in something real, something measured, something that has been studied with the rigor of a career devoted to understanding exactly the mechanism I have been describing. And understanding where it comes from will help you receive what it offers with the level of confidence that what I am giving you deserves. His name is Dr. Daniel Barone. He is a neurologist based in New York City, and his career has been devoted to the study of how the human brain operates under different conditions, what enhances its function, what diminishes it, and what might be done to restore what has been diminished. He was not looking for what he found. He was not pursuing a breakthrough product. He was pursuing a question that had troubled him for years. A question about the gap between what the brain was capable of in theory and what it was actually producing in practice in the lives of the patients who came to him. What he found is this. There is a specific kind of auditory input, a sequence of sound that targets the neural pathways connecting the two hemispheres of the brain, that when introduced to the listening brain in the right conditions, stimulates both hemispheres simultaneously and initiates the kind of cross-hemisphere coordination that is present in children operating at creative genius levels, and that is absent or diminished in the vast majority of adults. This is not binaural beats. Dr. Barone and his team studied existing auditory brain tools and found that most of them, including the binaural beat technology that has been widely marketed for years as a brain enhancement tool, do not produce measurable changes in the specific kind of whole brain coordination he was tracking. Most of them produce changes in brainwave state, in relaxation or alertness. Some of them produce changes in mood, but the specific increase in active cross-hemisphere communication that is the marker of whole brain activation, the thing I have been describing throughout this conversation as the mechanism that was present at full capacity when you were young and that has been diminished since, was not being produced by what was already available. What Dr. Barone developed is different in kind, not just in degree. It is not a variation on what you may have already tried. It is a specifically designed auditory sequence, built to deliver the precise kind of neural input that the brain responds to with the activation of both hemispheres simultaneously. The specific signal that stimulates the pathways that connect the two sides of your mind and restores the level of active information sharing between them that was present before the narrowing began. The sequence is 8 minutes long. That is not a marketing decision. That is the duration that the research indicated was required to stimulate the activation without overwhelming the neural system or producing the habituating effect that longer exposures can produce. 8 minutes a day, not as a supplement to an elaborate wellness routine, not requiring you to add something complicated to an already full life. 8 minutes, with headphones, eyes closed, allowing the sequence to do what it was built to do. And what it was built to do is restore the active collaboration between the two sides of the mind I gave you. The collaboration that was present when you were operating at your most capable. The collaboration that, when it is restored, changes the quality of what becomes possible in the thinking and creating and solving and building that everything you are believing for requires. I want to tell you about 3 people who have experienced what I am describing, not to prove something to you, but to give you a sense of what the experience of this restoration has looked like in lives that bear some resemblance to yours. There is a woman named Lisa. She is a nurse from San Diego, someone who spent her days giving everything she had to the people in her care and came home with very little left over for her own life and her own goals. Lisa had been believing towards something for years, a level of clarity and capacity that she sensed in herself as potential but could not access as reality. 8 minutes a day for 2 weeks and something shifted, not dramatically and suddenly, but undeniably. The access that had felt blocked opened, the ideas that had felt stuck began to move. There is a man named Matthew. He runs a business in Houston, a person who had built something real through extraordinary effort and who had been wondering for a long time whether the extraordinary effort was going to remain necessary forever or whether at some point the results would begin to feel proportionate to what he was putting in. He describes what happened after he began this practice as the first time in years that his thinking felt like the thinking of the person he knew himself to be when he was young and fully operational. And there is a woman named Ellie from Manhattan. Ellie had grown up in a family that carried what she called a bad star, a pattern of things going wrong at the moment they should have been going right, opportunities that arrived and then dissolved, effort that never quite converted into what it was reaching for. Ellie believed, and her family before her believed, that this was a curse, something written into the line, something beyond the reach of any individual effort to change. What Ellie found, when she encountered what I am describing, is that what had looked like a curse was a condition, a real, measurable, addressable condition in the neural architecture that had likely been running in her family for generations, passed forward not as fate but as function, not as spiritual destiny but as the inherited reduction in whole brain operation that the conditions of their shared lives had produced and reproduced in each generation. When the condition was addressed, the pattern broke, not because of a change in spiritual status, because of a change in the actual tool through which every effort and every prayer and every act of faith was operating. The tool became whole, and everything built with a whole tool is a different kind of construction than everything built with a partial one. I want to tell you something about the fact that this exists, that Dr. Barone found what he found and built what he built and made it available in the form it is available in. From where I sit, watching the threads of a life come together toward the moment where they serve their purpose, the development of this tool and its arrival in your awareness today are not separate events. They are a single arc. I have been working both ends of it for longer than you know. The years you spent developing the faith that keeps going without full evidence, and the years Dr. Barone spent developing the understanding of the mechanism that is about to give that faith its full return, were running in parallel toward this conversation, toward this moment, toward the step I am about to offer you. I do not arrange things carelessly. Everything I arrange toward a specific meeting. This is that meeting. And I want you to understand something about the people who have experienced this restoration that I have not yet said directly. The common thread in their stories is not that they were extraordinary people who found an extraordinary tool and had an extraordinary outcome. The common thread is that they were ordinary people, carrying the same limitation that nearly every adult carries, who took a specific step and who experienced what becomes available when that limitation is removed. They are not exceptions to a general rule. They are examples of a general result, a result that is available to anyone who takes the step, including you, especially you. These are not extraordinary people. They are people who were living with the same condition you have been living with, who took the same step I am about to offer you, and who experienced the same restoration I am telling you is available to you before tomorrow arrives. I am ready to name it now. I have been building toward this moment through everything I have said in this conversation, walking you through the pain and the gap and the mechanism and the science and the stories of people who experienced the restoration. All of it was preparation for the name, and now I am going to give you the name because you have received the context that makes the name mean what it is supposed to mean. What Dr. Barone built is called the Genius Switch. It is an 8-minute auditory sequence delivered through headphones using a technology his team developed called Neural Sync. Neural Sync combines auditory signals in a way specifically designed to engage both hemispheres of the brain simultaneously, to stimulate the cross-hemisphere communication pathways, and to restore the level of active, whole-brain coordination that was present in those early years when you were operating at the fullest capacity I built into you. I want you to notice something about that name. Not creation, not build, the switch, because what it does is not add something new to what you are. It switches back on something that was always there, something that was operating at full power at the beginning and that was gradually switched down by the conditions of the years since. The switching down happens slowly, without your knowledge, without your consent. The switching back on, with the right signal reaching the right level of the architecture, does not have to be slow. 8 minutes. That is the investment the sequence requires. Not an elaborate routine requiring a restructured morning, not a practice demanding extended commitment before any effect is visible. 8 minutes with headphones and closed eyes, in any chair, at any point in your day that the quiet is available. 8 minutes during which the auditory sequence does what it was built to do, delivering the specific signal that the neural system responds to with the restoration of the collaborative state that was present when you were most fully yourself. I want to tell you something about what happens to a life when the switch comes back on, not in the language of scientific measurement, though the measurements exist and they are remarkable, in the language of lived experience, in the language of what it feels like from the inside when the two halves of your mind begin working together the way I designed them to. Ideas begin arriving before you are consciously chasing them, not because you have become a different person, because access to what was always in you has opened. Connections between things that seemed unrelated become visible before you have consciously attempted to connect them. That is, the right hemisphere contributing what it is designed to contribute to the conversation between the two sides of your mind. The left hemisphere, with its analytical and sequential processing, begins receiving the pattern-based, intuitive intelligence of the right hemisphere in real time, and the combination produces thinking that neither side could produce alone. Learning begins to stick differently. Information that required repetition to retain begins landing on first exposure, not because you have suddenly become more disciplined or more attentive, because the architecture that was designed to receive and retain information is operating at its full capacity, rather than at the reduced capacity that has been producing the need for more effort to achieve the same result. Creative solutions to problems that have been stuck begin emerging from a place that feels less like effort and more like access, not because the problems have become simpler, because the part of your mind that holds the creative intelligence I placed in you from the beginning is in active conversation with the part that can evaluate and implement what the creative intelligence finds. I want you to imagine something with me. I want you to imagine tomorrow morning, not a generic future tomorrow, but the specific tomorrow that arrives after you take the step I am about to give you. The tomorrow that begins with your mind beginning to shift, with access to what has been partially closed, starting to open, with the first signs of a difference in what it feels like to think and reach and create and build. I want you to imagine the version of yourself that is 6 months from that tomorrow. The version who has been waking up each day with 8 minutes of what I have described, 6 months of the gradual restoration of the full operation of the mind I gave you. What are you working on? What has moved? What have you built or begun or finished that has been waiting for the capacity to reach it? What relationship has healed because you have been able to show up from a more whole and integrated version of yourself? What prayer has been answered because the full architecture of the person who was believing it was finally engaged and operational? That is not a fantasy. That is the description of what becomes available when the specific condition I have been naming is addressed. It is what happened in the lives of Lisa and Matthew and Ellie. It is what is available to you when you take the step I am about to offer. And the step is not far. The step is in the description below. It is 1 click. It is 8 minutes a day. And it is available before tomorrow arrives. I want to speak one more thing before I take you to the specifics of how you access this. I want to speak to the part of you that is already preparing the objection. The part that has developed through years of encountering things that promised transformation and delivered something less. A kind of protective skepticism that engages before the evidence has been fully assessed. I honor that part of you. It has kept you from some real harm in your life. But I want you to notice something about it right now. The skepticism that protects you from things that are genuinely false is useful. The skepticism that protects you from things that are genuinely true by insisting that nothing can be as real as it is until after you have safely declined to engage with it, that is the skepticism I am asking you to set down for the length of this specific decision. Because the evidence I have placed before you today is not the evidence of a product with an attractive label and nothing behind it. It is the evidence of a neurological finding, studied by a career professional, validated by reproducible results in real people, and offered to you at a price that I am about to describe that makes declining based on financial grounds very difficult to justify. Let me tell you something about what it means that you are still here in this conversation. I have been speaking for a significant amount of time. I have covered a great deal of ground, and you have stayed. You did not leave when I named the mistake, even though your first instinct may have been to move toward the part of the message where the answer appears rather than sitting through the fullness of the diagnosis. You did not leave when the material shifted from the familiar language of comfort into the less familiar language of neuroscience. You stayed. I want you to understand what that staying tells me about you. It tells me that you are someone who is willing to receive the full story rather than just the part that feels good. It tells me that you are someone who wants the real answer, even when the real answer takes longer to arrive than a simpler answer would. It tells me that you are ready for what this step produces. Because the people who take this step are exactly the kind of people willing to stay long enough to fully understand what they are receiving and why. The step is this. The link in the description below this message leads to where Dr. Barone and his team made this available. When you follow that link, you will find everything I have described. The 8-minute sequence, the 4 bonuses, the guarantee that makes this step completely without financial risk. You do not lose anything by taking it. You gain back a version of yourself that has been partially inaccessible for years. The exchange is not close. The exchange is overwhelmingly in your favor. And it is available to you before tomorrow arrives, exactly as I promised at the beginning of this conversation. What I am going to do now is give you the full information about what is offered, what it costs, and what the guarantee means. I am going to be direct, because what I am about to tell you deserves to be heard clearly, stated plainly so that the decision in front of you is as simple as it is designed to be. What comes next is the practical information, the number, the guarantee, and the step. Let me tell you what this is not. This is not the kind of thing I bring to you lightly, wrapped in spiritual language to make something ordinary feel significant. What I have been building toward in this entire conversation is something that operates at a real, physical, measurable level. The neural collaboration I have been describing is not a metaphor. The reduction of it over time is not a spiritual concept. It is something that has been mapped by serious researchers using serious instruments, and that has produced serious, reproducible findings about what is possible when it is restored. I want to speak to the question you may be carrying about whether this can actually be as significant as I am saying, not because I need to convince you with argument, but because I know the voice that turns that question into a reason to pass without fully engaging, and I want to address it before it has a chance to be heard as wisdom, when it is actually the opposite of wisdom in this specific situation. The question that asks whether this is real is a good question. It is the right kind of question to bring to something new, but the answer to it is not found by dismissing before investigating. It is found by looking at what happens when people who have been in conditions similar to yours, people who have been pressing against the same kind of gap with the same kind of sincere effort, actually take the step and follow it for the period required to experience what it produces. And what those people report is not the mild, incremental, barely perceptible kind of change that characterizes most self-improvement tools. They report something qualitatively different. Not just a marginal improvement in how clearly they can think on their best days, a shift in the baseline, a change in what is available as the starting point rather than the ceiling. Lisa reported noticing within the first 2 weeks that the ideas she needed for her work were arriving without the effort she was used to expending to reach them. Matthew reported that decisions that had been taking him days of deliberation began resolving with a clarity that felt different in kind from the way he was used to making them. Ellie reported that the pattern she had believed was written into her family line began to break in ways that felt not like luck, but like the restoration of something that had always been designed to be available. These are not people who were in unusual circumstances. They were in the ordinary circumstances of an adult life, carrying the ordinary reduction in whole brain function that the ordinary conditions of modern life produce. They are examples of what becomes available when the condition is addressed, and the condition can be addressed for you today, before tomorrow arrives. I want to say something about where we are in this conversation. We have covered a great deal of ground together. We have talked about the pain, the gap, the mechanism, the science, the people who have experienced the restoration. We have arrived at the name and the description of what is being offered and why it matters. What comes next is the information about access, about what is offered and at what price and with what protection. And then what comes after that is the most important part of this conversation. Not the price, not even the product. What comes after is the declaration I am here to make over your life about what this step means for what follows it. But before I get there, I want to acknowledge something. This has been a long conversation, longer than the messages you may be used to receiving in this format, and I want to tell you why I gave you all of it, rather than giving you only the conclusion. The length is not accident. The length is the point, because what you have been carrying is not a surface problem, and what I have been offering is not a surface solution. The depth of what I have described today, the specificity of the mechanism and the evidence and the stories, was required to do justice to the depth of what you have been through and the significance of what is available to you now. You have sat with me through all of it. You have stayed present through the pain and through the science and through the stories and through the building of the case for the step. That staying is not nothing. It is the demonstration of something I have been saying throughout this conversation, that you are the kind of person who is willing to receive the full truth rather than only the part of it that feels good. That quality is one of the things that has made you trustworthy with what comes next, with the restoration that the step makes available, with the life that begins to emerge when the ceiling is removed. I want to tell you something about what I see when I look at your life from the other side of this step, not years from now, months. I see someone who is building what they have been believing for with the full capacity of the mind I gave them, rather than with the partial capacity that has been all that was available. I see someone whose prayers are being answered with a speed and specificity that was not available before, not because the prayers changed, but because the receiver changed, because the whole brain integration that allows the full human being to participate in the receiving became available. I see someone who looks back on today, on this conversation, on the specific step they took before tomorrow arrived, and who recognizes it as the turn. The moment the trajectory changed. Not gradually, not over another decade, but here, today, in the space between this message and the next morning. That is what is available to you, and I am not withholding the path to it. I have been building toward the path the entire conversation, and now that I have given you the full picture, the full understanding of what the problem is and what the step addresses and what the step produces, I am ready to give you the final piece. I want to spend a moment on something that is easy to pass over in a conversation about products and steps and practical information. I want to spend a moment on what the restoration of the full mind I gave you actually means for the person you are in the world, not just for the tasks you accomplish, for the experience of being you. There is a quality of life that is available when the full architecture of your thinking is engaged, that is different from the quality of life that has been available when only part of it was active, not just more productive, more alive, more present, more connected to what is happening around you and inside you. The ideas do not only work better, the experience of having ideas feels different. Creating and building toward what you believe for feels like something you do from your full self rather than from the fraction of your full self that has been available. I place that full experience in you as your design, and I am not describing something that belongs only to exceptional people in exceptional circumstances. I am describing the standard operating experience of a human mind that is working the way I made it to work. It is what was available to you in the beginning. It is what was gradually reduced by the conditions of a life lived in the world as it is. And it is what is restored when the specific mechanism I have been describing is addressed with the specific tool I have named. You were not made for a life experienced from a narrowed version of yourself. You were made for the full version, and that full version is what the step I have been describing begins to restore, not in theory, not as a distant aspiration, as a measurable, experiential reality that begins to shift within the first days and weeks of the 8 minutes I have been describing. That is what is available before tomorrow arrives. That is what I came to give you today. One more thing before I take you to the final information. I want to say something about the guarantee that comes with what Dr. Barone offers. Because I know that for someone who has tried things before and who has experienced the particular disappointment of sincere hope that did not produce the result that was promised, the question of what happens if this does not work is not an unreasonable question. It is the kind of question a wise person asks before taking a step, and I honor you for asking it. The information about the price, about what is included, about the guarantee, and about the one thing I need to say, about where you find it and where you do not, all of that is coming now. And after it comes, I am going to close this conversation with a declaration that I have been holding for the moment when everything else has been said and you are ready to receive it fully. What Dr. Barone offers comes with an ironclad, 100% money-back guarantee, not limited by the number of times you listen. Not voided if you finish the sequence and decide it is not producing what I described. You listen, you give it the time the research indicates it requires to produce the shift. And if what I have described does not become your experience, you contact his team and every dollar is returned to you. Not a partial refund, not a credit towards something else. Every dollar returned to the account it came from. That guarantee is not marketing language designed to make a hesitant person feel safe enough to buy. It is the statement of someone who has enough confidence in what the research shows and what the tool produces to stand behind it without reservation. When a person builds something they believe in at the level the guarantee requires, they do not offer it strategically. They offer it because they have seen what happens when the right person takes the step, and they are willing to stake the financial transaction on the result. I want to spend a moment on what the guarantee communicates about the nature of what you are being offered. A guarantee of this scope, full money back, no questions, regardless of how many times you have engaged the product, is not something that can coexist with a product that does not do what it claims to do. It cannot survive repeated deployment at scale if the experience of the people who use it consistently fails to match what it promised. I want you to understand something about what it means that the guarantee exists. In a decision where the risk of being wrong belongs entirely to the other party, there is only one rational outcome for you. You do not have to trust what I have said on the basis of faith alone. You do not have to override the part of yourself that has learned, through experience, to test promises against reality before fully accepting them. The guarantee says that the test costs you nothing if the promise does not hold. The only way you cannot know whether what I have described is your experience is if you choose not to find out. And that choice, in the specific circumstances of this decision, with this guarantee in place, is not the wisdom it might feel like. It is the protection of a status quo that has already been costing you far more than $39 every day it has persisted. Now let me tell you about the price. I told you I was going to be direct. Colleagues who reviewed what Dr. Barone built told him it would be an incredible value at $500, not flattery. Assessment. In-person neurofeedback sessions that produce comparable neural activation through clinical equipment cost $300 per session, and patients attend many sessions across multiple weeks. A home neurofeedback machine, for those who want the benefit of repeated neural activation without recurring appointments, costs $7,000. What, doctor? Barone Built delivers neural activation through a specifically designed auditory sequence that requires only headphones. No machine, no appointment, no recurring cost. A one-time access, owned for life. He released it first at $49, 40% below what people who understood what it delivered said it was worth. And because of where you are in this specific conversation, the price available to you today through the link in the description is not $49, it is $39 for the sequence, $39 for the 4 bonuses, $39 for lifetime access and the ironclad guarantee, and $39 as the starting point of the restoration of the mind I gave you, rather than the cost of another day of the gap I have been describing. I want to speak directly about what that $39 is actually purchasing in the larger story of your life, not just the product, the access point. You have been living with the gap I described, the gap between the capacity I placed in you and what has been available to express through that capacity for years. That gap has cost you real things, not just productivity, not just output, confidence, the experience of your own capability, the willingness to reach for things that the reduced access to your full capacity made feel unreachable. The $39 is not the price of a product. It is the price of the door opening on the other side of what that gap has cost you. Now, let me say something I need to say clearly. There are tracks available on streaming platforms, on free audio sites, and through various digital distribution channels that describe themselves using the language of genius activation and whole brain synchronization. I need you to hear what I am about to say, because I care about what you do with what you have heard in this conversation, and I want to make sure what you do with it leads to the actual result I have been describing rather than to something that produces none of it. The 4 bonuses I mentioned earlier are worth naming specifically so you understand what is included in what you access today. The first is a guided visualization from a top-rated practitioner designed to help you use the whole brain state the sequence produces to inhabit the specific future you have been believing for. The second is a nutrition guide, naming the 10 most common foods that research associates with the kind of neural fog that counteracts the clarity the sequence builds, along with 5 grocery shortcuts that reduce your monthly food spending while supporting what you are building. The third is a classic text, over a century old, considered by researchers of human potential to be the original source of every modern methodology about the relationship between mindset and outcome. The fourth is a printable visual reference outlining the 5 daily habits most consistently associated with the life you are reaching for. Each bonus is included at no additional cost. Dr. Barone and his team studied the tracks circulating under these labels. Most of them contain no neural sync technology. They were labeled with the vocabulary of the category without containing the specific auditory design that the category requires. They produce changes in brainwave state, relaxation, mood, but the specific cross-hemisphere activation that the research identifies as the marker of whole brain coordination, the measurable change in the communication between the 2 hemispheres, was not produced by what is available through general distribution channels. The reason Dr. Barone distributes only through his team directly is quality protection. The actual sequence, built to the specification the research describes, is not the same as what is labeled similarly on streaming platforms. If you search and find something similar elsewhere, it is not what I have been describing. I want to say one thing about what the step before tomorrow actually means in the frame of this conversation. The title of this message was not accidental. Do this before tomorrow arrives. I gave you that title because what I am describing is not a step for someday, not a step for when things slow down, not a step for after you have thought about it for a week. Tomorrow is already in motion. The conditions of tomorrow are already being set by what you carry into it from today. What I am asking you to do is take the specific step that begins to shift those conditions before tomorrow gets here, before the next version of the same day begins, before another cycle starts without the thing I have placed in front of you today. I want to speak one more thing before the declaration. I want to speak to timing, because timing is part of what I came here to address today. The message I opened with was specific. Before tomorrow arrives. That was not rhetorical device. It was the specific framing I chose because the step I have been building toward is one that is most powerful when it is taken before the next cycle begins. Before the next morning arrives carrying the same conditions that produce the gap I have described. Before another day of the same reduced access to the mind I gave you becomes the baseline again. The link in the description is the step. It is available now. What follows this declaration is an invitation to take that step before this conversation ends, before tomorrow arrives. Before another cycle begins with the same conditions that have produced every cycle before it, I am about to declare something over your life. And I want what I declare to land in the space of someone who has received the full truth and is ready to move. Now, I am going to make the declaration, and I want you to be still for it. I want you to set down whatever you have been holding in your mind while we have been talking, the plans you have been making, the doubts you have been managing, the assessment of whether what I have said is real or not. I want you to set all of that down for the length of what I am about to say, because what I am about to say is the reason I came here today. You are not someone who arrived at this moment by accident. You are not someone who was navigating the ordinary drift of an ordinary day and happened to land on this message by coincidence. The person who arrives at this specific conversation, who stays through everything I have said, who brings the specific hunger for real answers about why the effort has not converted and what can be done, that person was directed here, not by an algorithm, by me. I know what you have been carrying, not in general terms, specifically, the weight of the gap between what you know you are capable of and what has been coming through, the weariness that has accumulated across the attempts that were sincere and the outcomes that were partial, the specific kind of discouragement that belongs to someone who is not lazy, who is not failing to try, who is trying with genuine commitment, and who is still not arriving at the place the trying was supposed to reach. I know that weight. I allowed you to carry it for a season because what the season was building in you was required for what comes next. But I am here today to tell you that the season has a boundary, and that boundary is now. The carrying of what you have been carrying was preparation, not permanent assignment. You were not designed for a life defined by the gap I described. You were designed for a life defined by the fullness I built into you from the beginning. The whole brain capacity, the full creative and analytical and intuitive intelligence I placed in you before the conditions of the world began to narrow what was available. That is what you were made to operate from, and that is what I am restoring to you, beginning with the step I have placed before you today. I want to tell you what this declaration costs me to make. Not in suffering, in specificity. I do not make declarations like this across every conversation. I make them when I am bringing something specific to a specific person at a specific moment in a specific story that has been building toward a specific turn. This is that moment. This is that person. This is that story. And the specificity of what I am declaring is the specificity that the evidence of everything I have said in this conversation supports. I am not speaking in the direction of a vague aspiration and calling it a prophecy. I am naming what is in front of you right now and calling it by its real name, a door. Let me speak to what the restoration looks like in the areas where the gap has cost you most, in your finances. I see the places where the ideas that would have changed your financial story were present in embryo, but could not fully form, because the architecture that translates whole brain insight into actionable clarity was not fully operational. I see the decisions made from partial information not because you lacked intelligence, but because the connection between the two halves of your mind that produces the full picture was not fully engaged. The restoration I am describing changes that, not by making you a different person, by returning you to the fullness of the person I made you. In your relationships, I see the conversations that did not go the way you needed them to go because the emotional and rational integration that comes with full whole brain function was not fully available in the moment. I see the patterns that have repeated across relationships that you tried to change with genuine effort and that changed only partially because the root of the pattern lives in the neural architecture rather than in the behavior alone. The restoration changes that too, not quickly, not without your participation, but with a depth of access to your own processing that the 8 minutes I am describing begins to open, in your sense of purpose. In the specific knowing of why you were placed here and what you were placed here to build and who you were placed here to serve. That knowing has been present in you but partially muffled, accessible in glimpses rather than as the steady knowing that comes with the full operation of the mind I gave you. The restoration does not create a purpose you did not have. It opens the channel through which the purpose I placed in you from the beginning can be received and acted on with the clarity that was always intended. These are not empty promises. They are the description of what becomes available when the specific mechanism I have been describing is addressed. They are the description of what Lisa and Matthew and Ellie began to experience within weeks of taking the step. They are the description of what 18,456 people have reported moving toward after deciding the step was worth taking. You are a cycle breaker. I name you that before this conversation ends because it is the truest thing about you in this season. The patterns that have accumulated across your family line, the narrowing of capacity and the reduction of access, and the gap between potential and expression that has traveled from generation to generation, those patterns stop with you. Not because you are stronger than those who came before you, because you are the one positioned at this specific moment, with this specific understanding of the mechanism, with this specific access to the step that the understanding makes possible. The people who came before you did not have what you have today. They did not have the name, they did not have the science, they did not have the step. You do, and that changes everything. I want you to understand what I mean when I say the patterns stop with you. I do not mean that you simply experience less of what they experienced. I mean that the thing that has traveled down the line, the neural narrowing, the whole brain deficit that has expressed itself differently in different people across generations, but has been the same underlying condition throughout. I mean that condition ends in your body and does not pass to those who come after you. Because you addressed it, because you took the step that your ancestors did not have the specific opportunity to take. That is what a cycle breaker is. Not a person with superior strength. A person with specific positioning at a specific moment in history. I am not finishing this conversation with sentiment. I am finishing it with the specific invitation I came here to deliver. The link in the description below is the step. It is one movement. It is the action that separates what has been from what begins now. Before tomorrow arrives, click it. Go to the page. Access what Dr. Barone and his team have built. Listen for 8 minutes a day. Let what I have promised in this conversation become your experience. Comment ready below when you take the step. Comment soon if you are moving toward it but need a little more time. Comment question if there is something you need answered first. I read these. You are not alone in this conversation even after the message ends. I want to go back to the beginning of this conversation for a moment, not to review what I said, to let you feel the distance between where you were when this message started and where you are right now. When this conversation began, I told you that I needed to talk to you about a mistake I called unforgivable, not to condemn you, but to name the gravity of what happens when the architecture I placed in you from the beginning is not operating at the level it was designed to operate at. I used that word to create the weight required for you to receive the full truth, not to shame you, to honor the seriousness of what the gap has cost you. And I said before tomorrow arrives, not as a pressure tactic, as a description of what is actually available. The thing I came to give you today is available before tomorrow arrives. It exists. It has a name. It has a price. It has a guarantee. It has 18,456 people who took the step before you and who reported what the step produced. And it is available to you right now, in the window between this moment and the moment tomorrow begins. I want to speak to what tomorrow represents in your specific story, not tomorrow in general, the specific tomorrow that follows today, the tomorrow that begins after the day you either took this step or did not. Because both versions of tomorrow exist as possibilities right now, and I want you to understand the difference between them. The tomorrow where you did not take the step is familiar. It is the tomorrow that has been arriving for a while. It carries the same conditions into the same day as the day before it, the same partial access to the mind I gave you, the same gap between the reaching and the arriving, the same accumulated effort producing the same partial outcome. The tomorrow where you took the step is different, not because the step produces instant transformation, because the step produces the beginning of the restoration that is cumulative and directional. The first day after you take the step is not dramatically different from the day before it, but the first week is. The first month is measurably different from the month before. And the first year in which you have been waking up with 8 minutes of the neural restoration that the sequence delivers, is the year in which the things you have been believing for begin arriving in ways that feel like what you have always known they were supposed to feel like. I want to spend a moment on what that year looks like from the inside, because I think one of the things that makes it difficult to take a step toward a future that is different from the present is that the future does not yet feel real. The present feels real. The present is where the bills are, and where the relationships are, and where the health situation is, and where the daily experience of the gap I have been describing is. The future, where the restoration has happened and where the mind is operating from its full capacity, is an idea, and ideas have a harder time mobilizing action than concrete present reality does. So I want to make the future more concrete. I want to describe what a year of the 8 minutes I am describing actually looks like in the life of a real person who started from the conditions I have been describing. Lisa, who I told you about earlier in this conversation, reported that the first 2 weeks produced a subtle but unmistakable shift in the quality of her thinking. Not a dramatic before and after. A change in texture. The ideas she needed for her work began arriving without the specific effort she was used to expending to reach them. By the end of the first month, she was noticing that decisions that had previously taken deliberation were resolving with a clarity that felt qualitatively different. By 3 months, she was producing creative work that she recognized as different in kind from what she had been producing before, not just more of the same, but something she described as coming from a deeper place. Matthew, who I also told you about earlier, began noticing the change in his relationships first, not in his productivity, in his presence. He began being able to hold the complexity of a difficult conversation without the conversational narrowing that had characterized his interactions before. By 2 months, he was having conversations with his children that he described as the conversations he had always wanted to have but had not been able to access in the moment. By 6 months, his business had moved in a direction that he traced back to a specific decision he had made in month 3 that he had been unable to see clearly before the restoration began. Ellie reported the most dramatic change in her sense of identity, not her productivity, not her relationships, specifically, the experience of being herself. She described it as the difference between living in a house with the lights at half power and living in the same house with the lights fully on. The house did not change. The furniture did not change. The floor plan did not change. But the quality of inhabiting the space changed entirely. She reported that within 6 months she had made decisions in 3 areas of her life that she had been unable to make before the restoration began, decisions that she described as coming from a version of herself she had not had consistent access to before. I want to speak to the people who are watching this who have already tried things, who have already been to the altar of the promise of change and come away with something that was real but not enough, who have invested money and time and hope in tools and courses and programs that produced partial movement and then leveled off at a new version of the same ceiling. I see you specifically. What you experienced in those attempts was not failure on your part. Your part was fully engaged. The tools were not built on the specific mechanism that the science I have been describing identifies as the root condition. They addressed behaviors and beliefs and patterns without addressing the neural substrate in which behaviors and beliefs and patterns live. That is why the movement was partial. What is different about the step I am describing is not that it is a better version of what you have tried before, it is that it operates at a different level, below the behavior, below the belief, at the physical structure of how the mind processes and integrates and generates, addressing the root rather than the expression, which is why the people who have experienced it report not just improvement in specific areas, but a shift in the underlying state from which they engage everything. That is the difference between addressing the symptom and addressing the cause. That is why 18,456 people describe the experience not as more of what they have tried before, but as the thing that made everything else they tried begin to work the way it was supposed to work. I also want to speak to the people watching this who are in a specific kind of pain right now, not the dull, persistent pain of the gap I have been describing. The acute pain of a specific thing that is happening, a specific relationship that is fracturing, a specific financial pressure that is urgent, a specific health concern demanding attention, a specific loss that has not been fully processed. I want to say to you that the step I have described is not incompatible with the immediate attention those things require. You do not have to be in a stable season to begin the restoration. 8 minutes a day is compatible with any season. And I want to say one more thing to you. If the pain you are carrying right now is the kind that makes everything else feel secondary, know that the whole brain restoration I have been describing is specifically powerful in the conditions you are in, because the narrowing of access that whole brain deficit produces is most acute under stress. The conditions that make clear thinking and creative problem solving and peace most desperately needed are exactly the conditions under which the reduction in whole brain function is most severe. The step I am describing addresses the root of why the hardest moments are harder than they need to be. It does not remove the hard moment. It returns to you the full capacity of the mind I gave you to meet it. You were not made to meet the hardest seasons with partial access to the mind I gave you. You were made to meet every season, including the hardest ones, from the full operation of the architecture I built into you from the beginning. That full operation is what I am restoring to you, and it begins before tomorrow arrives. I want to speak now to the person who joined this conversation late, who missed the first part of what I said and arrived somewhere in the middle, and has been trying to piece together what they missed from what they are hearing now. I want to give you the essential summary in a way that does not shortchange what I said at the beginning, but that meets you where you are now. The core of what I have been saying is this. There is a specific mechanism in the human brain, confirmed by Nobel Prize-winning research and extended through decades of subsequent scientific work, that is responsible for the difference between performing at partial capacity and performing at full capacity. That mechanism is the degree of active collaboration between the two hemispheres of your brain. In the early years of life, both hemispheres are actively engaged simultaneously, producing the kind of whole brain thinking that shows up as the curiosity and creativity and rapid learning and pattern recognition that children demonstrate. Over time, through the conditions of modern life, including stress and the narrowing of attention that most educational and professional environments require, that collaboration decreases. Most adults are operating with a significant deficit in cross-hemisphere coordination compared to what was present in the beginning. The result of that deficit is a gap, not a gap in intelligence, not a gap in effort, a gap in access. The intelligence is still there, the capacity is still there, but the full architecture of the mind, the version that produces the thinking and the problem-solving and the creative output and the decision-making quality that was present in the best moments, is not fully engaged. And the gap between what is actually in you and what has been available to express through you is the gap that shows up in every area of your life where you have pressed hard and arrived somewhere below where the pressing seemed like it should have taken you. That gap has a name, and it has a solution. The name of the solution is the Genius Switch. It is an 8-minute auditory sequence built by Dr. Daniel Barone, a neurologist based in New York, using a technology he developed called Neural Sync. Neural Sync delivers a specific auditory signal designed to stimulate active engagement in both hemispheres simultaneously, to restore the level of cross-hemisphere coordination that was present in the beginning, and that has been gradually reduced by the conditions of a life lived in the world as it is. 8 minutes a day through headphones. That is the requirement. That is what begins the restoration I have been describing throughout this entire conversation. The price for accessing this today, through the link in the description of this message, is $39. Not because that is what it is worth, because Dr. Barone believes that what he built should be accessible to the people who need it most, not only to those who can afford the clinical alternatives that cost hundreds of dollars per session. $39 includes the 8-minute sequence, 4 bonuses that support and extend what the sequence initiates, lifetime access, and a 100% money-back guarantee. You do not pay if it does not produce what I have described. The financial risk of finding out whether what I have said is your experience belongs entirely to Dr. Barone and his team. I want to restate that guarantee clearly because it matters to the decision in front of you right now. If you follow the link below, give it the time the research indicates it requires to produce the shift, and do not experience what I have described, you contact his team and every dollar is returned. Not a partial refund, not a store credit, every dollar back in your account. The only way you do not discover whether what I have promised is your experience is if you decline to find out. And in the context of a zero-risk financial transaction, declining to find out is not wisdom. It is the continuation of what has been at the expense of what could begin today. Now I want to do something I have not done yet in this conversation. I want to walk you through what the next 90 days actually look like, specifically for the person who takes the step I am describing today, not as marketing projection, as the description of what the data from the people who have done it shows is the typical experience for someone starting from the conditions I have been describing. In the first 2 weeks, most people report a change in the quality of their rest, not that they sleep more, that the sleep they get is more restorative. This is consistent with the research on what happens when cross-hemisphere brain activity shifts. The integration that happens during sleep is more efficient when the waking brain is operating at higher levels of whole brain coordination. Most people also begin noticing what they describe as a subtle but real change in the texture of their thinking. Ideas feel closer. Connections between things feel more available. The effort required to access the clarity they need begins to decrease. In weeks 3 through 6, the pattern shifts from subtle change to measurable change. Creative output begins to increase in both volume and quality. Decisions that previously required extended deliberation begin resolving with more confidence and speed. The emotional regulation that comes with whole brain function begins to show up in relationships. People who knew the person before the shift begin commenting that something is different, often before the person has mentioned the sequence, not because they are watching for it, because the change in the underlying state produces a change in how the person shows up that is visible to others before it is fully articulable by the person themselves. In months 2 and 3, the cumulative effect of the daily practice begins producing the results that most of the 18,456 people in the community describe when they share their stories. Financial decisions move in new directions. Relationship patterns that were stuck begin shifting. Creative projects that have been stalled begin completing. The sense of purpose that has been present but muffled begins arriving with a clarity that allows it to be acted on rather than just believed in. This is the phase where the gap I have been describing begins closing, not just in experience, but in measurable external outcome. I want to say something about the people who are going to comment below this message after they watch it and take the step. I read the comments. My team reads the comments. And what we see in the comments of conversations like this one is a specific pattern. In the first week, people comment to say they took the step and they are starting. In the second and third week, people come back to say something is shifting. And in the weeks and months after that, people describe the specific areas where the change became undeniable. They describe the financial breakthrough that arrived, the relationship that healed, the creative project that finally completed, the sense of direction that finally solidified. I want you to add your comment to that pattern. I want to read about the specific thing that changes for you in the first 90 days. I want your story to be in the comment section of this video as testimony to what becomes available when the specific mechanism I have described is addressed with the specific step I have offered. That is what I am building with these conversations, not just individual transformation, a record of what is possible. A testimony wall that shows the next person who arrives here what they are walking toward when they take the step. Your story belongs on that wall, and the step that puts it there is in the description below. I want you to sit with the distance between where you are right now and where that description places you in 90 days, not as a fantasy, as the documented trajectory of people who started where you are and took the step I am describing. The 90 days are going to pass either way. They are going to pass as the continuation of what has been or as the beginning of the restoration I have described. The only variable is the step, and the step is in the description below. One click, $39. 8 minutes a day before tomorrow arrives. I want to address something that may have happened at some point during this conversation. A thought that arrived and said something like, "This is too much," or "This sounds like what I have heard before," or "I am not sure I can trust this." I want to address that thought not by dismissing it, but by honoring it. That thought is the voice of accumulated experience, and accumulated experience that produces protective skepticism is a reasonable response to a world that has offered promises that did not deliver. I am not asking you to silence that voice. I am asking you to give it the right information to work with. The right information is this: the guarantee I described is real. The money-back protection I described is not a strategy. It is the provision that makes the protective skepticism and the action I am inviting completely compatible. You do not have to choose between protecting yourself and taking the step. The guarantee is designed so that you can do both at the same time. Take the step and remain protected. Find out whether what I have described becomes your experience, and if it does not, be fully returned to the position you were in before the step. There is no scenario in which taking the step makes you worse off than not taking it. There is only the scenario in which not taking it confirms the continuation of what has already been. I want to speak to something that lives underneath the skepticism in many people who have been in conversations like this one before. Not just whether this specific promise is real, but whether they are the kind of person this kind of thing happens for. Whether they are in the category of people who transform, who break cycles, who experience the restorations they have been believing for, or whether they are in a different category. The category of people for whom the promises are real in general, but not specifically for them. I need to address that belief directly because it is one of the most significant things I need to dissolve before this conversation ends. That belief. The belief that transformation happens for other people, but that you are specifically excluded from it by some quality of your particular situation or history or character. That belief is not discernment. It is the deepest expression of the narrowing I have been describing throughout this conversation. It is the whole brain deficit expressing itself not as difficulty thinking clearly, but as difficulty believing that clear thinking will produce results for you specifically. It is the most personal and most painful version of the gap, and I want to dismantle it with evidence rather than reassurance. The evidence is the specific people I told you about earlier. Lisa was not someone for whom transformation had previously come easily. Her background included decades of trying hard at things and arriving at partial results. She was not someone who believed she was in the category of people for whom the restorations happened quickly and completely. She took the step anyway, not because she had certainty, because the guarantee removed the financial reason not to find out, and what she found out is what I described. Matthew had a more specific reason to believe he was excluded. His family of origin had not produced examples of financial breakthrough or professional flourishing that he could point to as evidence that his line was capable of this kind of shift. The pattern he was trying to break was not a minor variation. It was generational. He took the step not because he had faith that it would work for him specifically, but because the cost of not finding out felt higher than the cost of finding out. The financial risk was covered. The only remaining risk was the risk of hope, and he decided that was a risk worth taking. I am telling you these stories again not because I want to repeat what I already said. I am telling them again because the second time you hear them, after everything else I have said in this conversation, they mean something different. They are not just case studies now. They are the description of people who were in the same position you are in right now, holding the same thought that maybe this is not for them, and who took the step anyway and discovered that the thought was wrong. I want to name you one more time before this conversation reaches its final section. You are the silent survivor, the one who has held things together in the background while others notice the effort but not the cost. The one who has kept going when stopping was the easier and more understandable choice. The one who has maintained faith in what was possible even when the visible evidence was providing reasons to abandon it. I know that person. I placed that perseverance in you. And I want you to know that the perseverance you have been exercising was not pointless. It was the building of the container for what is coming. The years of holding on were the preparation of a person who is ready to receive the fullness of what the restoration makes available without it overwhelming the structure that was not ready for it. You are ready now, not because you have finally become strong enough, because the seasons of holding have built the capacity to hold what I am about to give you. The restoration I am describing does not arrive in a person who has not been formed by the waiting. It arrives most powerfully in a person who has carried the gap long enough to know what they were carrying and to be specific about what the filling of it means. You know that. You have been carrying it long enough to know it precisely. And that specificity is the thing that will make what the step produces most recognizable and most usable when it begins to arrive. I want to spend a moment on what it means to be in this specific moment of this specific conversation and to have stayed through everything I have said. The length of this conversation was not accidental. I did not come here to give you a brief encouragement and move on. I came here to do something more thorough than that. I came here to walk you through the full understanding of what has been happening in your mind, why it has been happening, what the mechanism is, what the specific step is that addresses the mechanism, and what the step produces in the lives of real people who have taken it. All of that required the length it required, and the fact that you stayed through the length of it tells me that you were ready to receive all of it, not just the comfortable parts, but the parts that required sitting with the full weight of what has been at stake. I want to address something specific about the decision that is in front of you right now. It is not actually a complex decision. It feels complex because of the weight of what you have been carrying and because of the accumulated experience of things that promised change and delivered something less. But the structure of the decision itself is simple. There is a step. The step has a price. The price is $39. The step has a guarantee. The guarantee removes the financial risk entirely. The step has evidence behind it in the form of science and testimonies and the stories of specific people I named. And the step is available right now, before tomorrow arrives. That is the complete structure of the decision. Everything else is the weight you are adding to it, and I am asking you to set that weight down for long enough to see the decision clearly. This is not an ending. This is an opening. What I have been saying in this entire conversation has been moving toward this moment, the moment where the opening is named and the step through it is placed in front of you. The step is in the description. The guarantee protects you. The science supports you. The testimony of the people who went before you encourages you. And the declaration I made over your life earlier in this conversation stands regardless of what you do with this specific invitation. You are a cycle breaker. You are the person positioned at this specific moment for this specific purpose. That is true whether or not you take the step today. But the step accelerates what is already true. And acceleration is what the season you are in requires, not another year of the same conditions. The acceleration that comes when the root condition is addressed and the full capacity of the mind I gave you begins operating as I always intended it to, that acceleration is available today, before tomorrow arrives, through the link in the description below. Let me pray with you before this conversation goes further, not because prayer is what comes at the end when everything important has already been said, because prayer is the most direct form of communication I have for this specific moment in your story. What I say in prayer over you right now is not a performance. It is the actual declaration of what I am doing in your life in this season. I see you. I see the specific weight you carried into this conversation. I see the questions you brought, the ones you spoke and the ones you only held. I see the places where the faith has been pressed thin by the distance between the promise and the arrival. I see the specific relationships where the cost of the gap has been most visible, the specific financial pressure that has been carrying the most weight, the specific creative aspiration that has been waiting the longest for the capacity required to reach it. And I declare over all of it that the season of the partial is ending, not because you have finally done the thing required to end it, because I have placed in your path today the specific thing that was required to be placed there, and you have stayed long enough to receive it, and that staying is the thing I needed from you. Everything else I am providing. The science is provided, the tool is provided, the evidence is provided, the guarantee is provided, the price is within reach. All I needed from you was the willingness to stay in the conversation long enough to receive all of it, and you did that. I declare over your finances that the ideas that have been partially forming are about to fully form. The connections that have been present but not fully accessible are about to become available. The decisions that have required more deliberation than they should have required are about to resolve with a clarity that reflects the full operation of the mind I gave you, not because your circumstances have changed, because your access to the mind that navigates the circumstances is changing. I declare over your relationships that the walls that have been up are coming down, not the walls you put up to protect yourself from genuine harm. The walls that formed without your consent as a consequence of the narrowing I have been describing. The walls that reduced your access to the emotional and relational intelligence I placed in you, and that made full presence in the relationships that matter most to you more difficult than it was designed to be. Those walls thin and fall as the whole brain function is restored. That is not a metaphor. It is the documented experience of people who have taken the step I am describing. The way they show up in their closest relationships changes as the neural integration that underlies emotional intelligence is restored. I declare over your health that the body follows the mind, that the chronic stress response that is the companion of the narrowing I have described, and that produces in the body the kind of sustained arousal that contributes to the physical conditions most commonly associated with stress, begins to shift as the brain shifts. The research on the relationship between whole brain coherence and nervous system regulation is consistent. When the brain moves toward greater integration, the nervous system moves toward greater regulation. The body benefits from what happens in the mind, and the mind is what I am restoring. I declare over your sense of purpose that the knowing that has been present in you but muffled is about to become clear, not the vague sense that you were made for something. The specific knowing of what that something is and what the next step in it is, and who you are called to serve in it. That clarity belongs to the fully integrated mind, the mind that has access to both the analytical left hemisphere that can assess and plan, and the intuitive right hemisphere that can sense and receive and pattern recognize. When both are engaged, purpose is not something you have to pursue, it arrives. I want to say something about what it means that you are receiving this specific declaration in this specific conversation, on this specific day. The arrangement of these things is not random. The message you received that led you here was not random. The amount of this conversation you have stayed through is not random. These are the coordinates of a specific moment that I arranged, not to flatter you, to position you for the step that this entire arrangement was building toward. The step is in the description below. It is the step that the arrangement was pointing toward all along. I want to speak to something that happens in the space between hearing a message like this one and actually taking the action it describes. There is a specific window. The window is the period immediately following the message, when the words are still present and the feeling they produced is still accessible. In that window, the decision is closest to being made. The brain is still in the activated state that the content produced. The connection between what you heard and what you can do about it is most available. The further from the window you move without taking the action, the more the ordinary conditions of the ordinary day reclaim the attention and reduce the access to the clarity and the motivation that the message produced. I am telling you this, not to pressure you, to inform you. The window exists. You are in it right now. The link is in the description. The step is one click. I want to speak to the part of you that is waiting for a sign before you take the step. I want to say something direct about that. This is the sign, not the most dramatic sign you have ever received. I did not part a sea for this message, but I also did not arrange a sea parting for you in this season, because what I arranged was more precisely suited to what you actually need. I arranged a conversation, a specific conversation about a specific mechanism and a specific solution, delivered at a specific moment in your story when the conditions were right for you to receive it and act on it. That is the form of sign that this season required, and it is in front of you right now. I also want to speak to the people watching this who are going to share this message. Some of you know someone carrying the same gap I described, someone pressing against the same ceiling. Share this with them before today ends. Not as a task, as an act of the cycle breaking I named you for. And I want to say one final thing in this section before I move to the last words of this conversation. I want to say something about what it means to you personally that a message like this one was arranged for this specific day in your specific life. The specificity of the arrangement is the thing I most want you to hold, not the general truth that I care about you, though that is the most foundational truth I could give you. The specific truth that on this day, in this conversation, at this exact point in your story, I place something specific in front of you, something with a name, something with a price, something with a guarantee, something with science behind it and testimony supporting it, and a step that is one click away. The specificity is the love. The generality would have been easier to arrange. The specific thing, the right thing for the right person at the right moment, that is what I arranged for you today. I want to be specific about what I am asking you to do when this conversation ends. Not just take the step, though the step is essential. I want to ask you to take the step and then to come back here tomorrow and comment, not about whether the sequence worked yet. It will not have had enough time to produce the full shift by tomorrow. Come back and comment about the fact that you took the step, that you decided that the continuation of what has been was not the only option available to you, that you decided before tomorrow arrived, as I asked you to. That decision is worth recording. It is worth naming publicly, and it is worth inviting others who see your comment to consider what you considered and to take the step you took. You are not the last person who will see this conversation. Many people will see it after you, and the testimony you leave in the comment section will be part of what they receive when they arrive here. Your story, the story of the person who stayed through the whole conversation and took the step and came back to say so, is a story that will serve the next person who arrives at this conversation in the same condition you arrived in. That is the kind of cycle breaking that extends beyond your own life and into the lives of the people who come after you. If you just arrived at this conversation, or if you have been watching and you have not yet fully engaged with what I have been saying, I want to take a moment for you specifically. What I have been building toward through this entire message is something I need to state plainly for the person who is encountering these ideas for the first time. There is something specific you can do before tomorrow arrives that will begin a change in your life that you have been waiting for. It is not a spiritual formula. It is not a motivational technique. It is an 8-minute daily practice that works at the level of the physical architecture of your brain using an auditory sequence developed by a neurologist from New York, backed by decades of research into what separates the people who reach their full potential from the people who carry their full potential without ever fully accessing it. The practice I named earlier in this conversation is available in the description below this message. The price is $39. The guarantee is 100%, no questions, full return if it does not deliver what I am about to describe. What it delivers is the restoration of the whole brain coordination that was operating at its fullest in the early years of your life and that has been gradually reduced by the conditions of the decades since. When that coordination is restored, access to the full capacity of the mind I placed in you becomes available in a way it has not been available for years. Ideas arrive without the same effort. Decisions resolve with more clarity. Creative problems that have been stuck begin moving. Relationships improve because the emotional and analytical integration that whole brain function produces becomes available in real time in the conversations and interactions that require it. That is what becomes available. The research supports it. The testimonies of 18,456 people who have taken the step confirm it. The ironclad guarantee protects you if your experience does not confirm it. And the step is available to you today, before tomorrow arrives, exactly as I promised at the beginning of this message. The title of this conversation was not rhetorical. It was the announcement of the specific thing I came here to deliver to you today. I want to spend a moment on why this specific tool exists and why I brought it to you in this specific format. Dr. Daniel Barone did not build what he built because it was an obvious commercial opportunity. He built it because his clinical work as a neurologist gave him access to the specific research that most people, even most educated and motivated people, have never encountered. The research on whole brain activation and its relationship to human potential has been sitting in academic literature for decades, producing extraordinary results in the small number of clinical and research settings where it has been applied, and almost entirely absent from the popular conversation about why some people consistently outperform what their circumstances would predict, while others, with equivalent intelligence and effort, do not. He built it because he wanted to make the intervention that the research pointed to available at a price and in a format that did not require a clinical appointment or a $7,000 machine. And the format he built, 8 minutes through headphones, accessible anywhere, usable at any time of day, requiring no equipment beyond what most people already own, is the format that the research shows is sufficient to produce the neural activation that the science identifies as the marker of whole brain coordination, not a reduced or approximate version of the clinical outcome. The outcome itself delivered through a different mechanism. I want to tell you something about what happens in the first few days after you begin the practice, not weeks, days. Because I know that one of the things that makes people hesitant about tools that require sustained practice to produce their full effect is the fear that there will be no early signal, no early confirmation that the thing is doing anything at all. Before the full effect has time to develop, most people report noticing something within the first 3 to 5 uses, not the full restoration. A change in texture, a subtle shift in the quality of the thinking available in the hours following the 8 minutes. A change in what ideas are reaching during those hours. A change in the ease of the reaching, not dramatic, recognizable. The kind of change that a person who has been in the conditions I have been describing for years immediately identifies as different from what they are used to. That early recognition is what motivates the continued practice, not discipline, evidence. The practice continues because the early evidence makes the continuation feel not like commitment but like return. Like returning to something that was yours from the beginning and that you are rediscovering. That is what the people who take the step and stay with it report, not the grind of a new practice. The relief of something familiar coming back on. I want to speak to the question of what to do if you have already taken the step and you are watching this as someone who has been using the sequence for a period of time and wants to receive what I am saying in this part of the conversation as encouragement and confirmation of what you are experiencing. I see you too. What you are experiencing is real. The changes you are noticing are the early expressions of what becomes much more available as the practice continues. You are not imagining the shift. You are not projecting onto it because you paid for it and want it to work. You are experiencing the early restoration of something that was always there and that is coming back online. Stay with it. The trajectory you are on leads somewhere specific and significant. I want to say one more thing about the comment section, not about leaving a comment as a performance, as proof to others that you took the step, about leaving it as a commitment to yourself. There is research on the relationship between publicly stating an intention and following through on the behavior the intention describes. When you name something publicly, even in the comments of a video, the activation of that statement in your own mind has a measurable effect on the probability of the behavior continuing. Commenting that you took the step is not a social media action, it is a neurological one. It is the beginning of the story of your next season told from the moment of the decision, not from the moment of the outcome. And the outcome is more likely because the story began here. I want to close this section with a simple instruction, not a complicated set of steps. One movement. Go to the description below this video, find the link, click it. Follow the steps on the page. Begin tonight or tomorrow morning, 8 minutes. That is the step. Everything I have said in this conversation, all of the science and the stories and the declaration and the prayer, all of it was preparation for that one movement. The movement is small. What it begins is not small. What it begins is the restoration of the full mind I gave you, operating from tomorrow forward at the level I designed it to operate from. That is what one click, $39, and 8 minutes a day can begin. And for the person who has not yet taken the step, I want to bring you back to the beginning of what I said, before tomorrow arrives. That was the promise. The promise is available. The link is in the description. The price is $39. The guarantee is complete. The science is real. The testimonies are real. The person who built this is real, and the need that this addresses, the specific neural mechanism that has been producing the gap between your potential and what has been available to express through your potential, is real. I have given you everything I came here to give you, not as entertainment, not as spiritual content to be consumed and moved past, as the specific information required to make a specific decision that produces a specific change in the specific life you are living right now. The decision is yours. The step is in the description, and tomorrow is closer than it was when this message started. I want to make sure you have the complete picture of what is available through the link in the description before this conversation ends. Not because I have not described it before, because some of you have arrived at this moment in the conversation after hearing all of it, and I want the complete picture to be in your mind at the moment of the decision. So I am going to state it clearly, specifically, and completely. What Dr. Barone built is called the Genius Switch. It is an 8-minute auditory experience delivered through headphones that uses neural sync technology to deliver specific auditory signals to both hemispheres of the brain simultaneously. The signals are designed to produce cross-hemisphere activation, the measurable increase in coordinated activity between the left and right hemispheres that research identifies as the neural signature of what we call genius-level thinking. Not for extraordinary people only. For anyone whose whole brain coordination has been reduced by the ordinary conditions of an ordinary modern life, which, according to the research, is almost everyone. The sequence is 8 minutes long. You use headphones. You find a quiet space and close your eyes. You do not have to do anything during the 8 minutes except receive what the sequence is delivering. There is no guided meditation to follow, no complex breathing technique to maintain, no visualization that requires effort. The sequence does what it is designed to do, and the brain responds to what the sequence is delivering without any additional effort from you beyond the 8 minutes of quiet attention. You do this daily, once per day. The cumulative effect of daily use is what produces the restoration I have been describing. The first uses produce the early signal that something is shifting. The first weeks produce the measurable change in the quality and accessibility of your thinking. The first months produce the life-level changes, the financial decisions that move differently, the relationships that shift, the creative output that increases in both volume and quality, the sense of purpose that arrives with a clarity that allows it to be acted on. Here is what you receive when you follow the link below. First, you receive the 8-minute neural sync sequence itself, in a format you can use daily on any device through headphones, with lifetime access that means you can return to it every morning for the rest of your life without any additional cost. Second, you receive a guided visualization developed by a top-rated practitioner designed to help you use the whole brain state the sequence produces to inhabit the specific future you are believing for across the areas of your life where you most need the change to arrive. Third, you receive a nutrition guide, 10 common foods, available in any American grocery store, that research consistently associates with the kind of neural fog that counteracts the clarity the sequence is designed to build. And alongside that, 5 grocery strategies that reduce your monthly food spending by over $100 while moving you toward the foods that support rather than undermine what you are building in your mind. Fourth, you receive a book, over 100 years old, considered by researchers of human potential to be the original text behind every modern methodology about the relationship between the mind and external results. Included because Dr. Barone believes it is most powerful when received in the whole brain state the sequence produces. Fifth, you receive a printable 1-page visual reference, beautifully designed, outlining the 5 daily habits that research most consistently associates with the kind of life transformation you are reaching for. Not 5 vague principles. 5 specific practices, formatted for display, designed to be put where you can see them every day as a reminder of what you are building. All 5 bonuses included, no additional charge. All of it available the moment you complete your access through the link below. The price for everything I just described is $39, not $500, which colleagues said would have been an incredible value, not $49, which was the initial public price. $39, available through the specific link in the description of this message for the complete package. And protected by an ironclad 100% money-back guarantee that means if the experience does not match what I have described, you contact Dr. Barone and his team and every dollar is returned to you. You have nothing to lose by finding out. You have years of restored access to the mind I gave you to gain. I want to be direct with you about one more thing. The step I am asking you to take is a small step with large consequence. The step itself, the click, the $39, the setup of the daily 8 minutes, takes less time than most of the activities you perform today without thinking about them. The consequence of the step is not small. The consequence is the beginning of the restoration of the whole brain coordination that was operating at its fullest in the beginning and that has been gradually reduced by the decades since. The consequence is the beginning of the closing of the gap that has produced the distance between your effort and your outcome for years. Small step, large consequence. Guaranteed against financial loss. Available before tomorrow arrives. There is no formulation of this decision that makes declining the rational choice. The rational choice, in the specific structure of this specific offer, is the step, and the step is in the description below. I am asking you to take it now, before the window of this conversation closes and the ordinary conditions of the ordinary day reclaim the attention that is fully available right now. I want to speak to someone specific right now. I want to speak to the person who has been watching this entire conversation and who has arrived at this moment carrying a specific number in their mind that they keep returning to. Not 39, a different number. The amount they have already spent on things that were supposed to change what I have been describing and that changed it only partially. I want to speak to the weight of that number, the accumulated cost of the attempts, the money that went toward books and programs and courses and spiritual retreats and counseling and all of the tools that genuine people built in good faith without access to the specific mechanism I have been describing. I want to acknowledge that weight, and then I want to say something about it. That weight is real. The money is gone and the gap is still here, and the question of whether one more attempt is wise is a question that only someone who has not felt that weight would dismiss as irrational. I am not dismissing it. I am naming something about it. Every one of those tools addressed something real. The books produced real insight. The programs produced real movement. The spiritual disciplines produced real formation. None of them addressed the specific neural mechanism I have been describing, which is why none of them produced the full outcome the effort was reaching for. The tools were not wrong, they were incomplete. What Dr. Barone built is not a replacement for what those tools were building. It is the foundation beneath them, the neural coherence that allows everything else you have built to express. I also want to speak to the people watching this who have the money and are still hesitating, not because of the financial barrier, but because of the emotional barrier. The barrier of having hoped before. The barrier of having believed that something was going to be the turn and having experienced the turn is smaller than promised. I understand that barrier. It is not financial caution. It is the protection of a heart that has been moved before and that learned the cost of being moved. I want to say to that specific person that the protection you built is understandable and that I am not asking you to put it down permanently. I am asking you to put it down for the length of one purchase with an ironclad guarantee. If the guarantee is not honored, you have confirmation that the protection was right. If the experience confirms what I described, you have the beginning of something that will eventually make the protection unnecessary because the gap it was protecting will have closed. Comment done below when you take it. That comment is for the next person who arrives here and needs to see that someone in the same position took the step. Your comment is part of the testimony that makes this conversation useful beyond today. We have reached the end of this conversation, and I want the end to feel like what it is, not the conclusion of a message, the opening of a chapter, the moment where everything that was said becomes the foundation for the first step into a season that looks different from the one you have been in. I want to close with the things that matter most, not the price, not the product, not the science. Those have been said, and they are present, and they are true. What I want to close with is the declaration of what I see when I look at your life from this moment forward. Not what it has been, what it is becoming, starting today. Starting with the decision that is in front of you at the end of this conversation. Starting with the step that takes you from hearing what is available to actually receiving it. I see a person who is entering a season of increase. Not the incremental kind of increase that comes from more effort applied to the same conditions. The qualitative kind. The kind that comes when the capacity available to the effort changes rather than the effort itself. I see your finances moving in a direction that has not been available in the seasons behind you. Not because your circumstances have suddenly become favorable, but because the mind that navigates the circumstances is operating from the full architecture I gave it, rather than from the reduced version that the years have been producing. I see your relationships deepening in a way that has required more than you have been able to bring to them, not because you lack the desire to bring it, but because the emotional and relational intelligence that belongs to the whole brain integration I have been describing was not fully accessible in the moments when the relationships required it most. That access is being restored, and the relationships that matter most to you will feel the change before you can fully articulate what has shifted. I see your creative life opening. The specific things you were placed here to build and create and offer to the world have been waiting for the mind that was designed to build them, not a different mind. The same mind you have always had, operating from the full architecture rather than the partial architecture that has been available. The creative work that has been forming below the surface, the ideas that have been present in embryo without having the full incubation environment they needed to fully form, those things are about to move. They are about to arrive. They are about to find the expression they have been waiting for. I want to speak to the people who are going to return to this conversation after they have taken the step and experienced what I described, not to hear me describe it again, to add their testimony to what already exists here. I want you to know that your testimony, when you return and leave it here, will be the thing that moves the next person who arrives in the condition you arrived in today. I am not building this conversation for you alone. I am building it as a place where the restoration I have been describing is witnessed and recorded and made available to everyone who arrives here. Your story, the specific story of the specific change that the step produced in the specific areas of your specific life, is the most powerful thing you can offer to the person who comes after you. Come back and leave it. I want to speak the peace over you, not as a closing sentiment, as a declaration of what accompanies the step I have described. The restoration of the mind I gave you is not a path to more anxious striving. It is a path to the peace that comes with operating from your full capacity, the peace that the narrowed mind cannot produce because the narrowed mind is always aware, at some level, that it is not operating at the level it was designed to operate at. The restlessness that has been present, the sense that something more is available and that the gap between what is available and what is expressed is a problem that needs to be solved, that restlessness resolves as the gap closes. Not all at once, progressively. Part of the peace I am declaring over you is the peace of the person who has stopped wondering whether the full version of themselves will ever be accessible and has begun the specific practice that makes the answer yes. I want to bless your hands, the work you do with them, the specific labor and craft and service and creation that your hands produce is about to receive the full benefit of the mind that guides them. I want to bless your mouth. The words you speak into the lives of the people around you are about to carry the full authority and presence that comes when the person speaking them is operating from their whole mind. I want to bless your sleep. The rest that the restored brain produces is deeper and more restorative than the rest that has been available in the conditions of the narrowing I described. Your mornings are going to feel different. The first hours of the day, when the whole brain state is freshest from the 8 minutes of the sequence, will become the most generative hours you have. The ideas that arrive in those hours will be the ideas you have been reaching for without being able to fully grasp. I want to bless your children. If they are young, they will benefit from the parent who is operating from the full capacity I gave that parent. The patience that whole brain integration produces, the presence that is available when the emotional and rational and intuitive dimensions of the mind are all engaged simultaneously, the model of a life built on the full expression of the potential I placed in a person, all of that will shape them in ways that cannot be quantified, but that will mark the line for generations. If they are grown, they will see the change in you, and it will give them permission to pursue the change in themselves. That is cycle breaking at its deepest and most lasting. I want to pause on something before the blessings continue. I want to speak to the specific gratitude I have for you, having stayed through this entire conversation. Not because your attention was a gift to me, because the attention you gave to this conversation was a gift to yourself, and I want you to recognize it as such. You gave yourself the full picture. You gave yourself the science and the context and the testimonies and the declaration and the invitation. You did not take a shortcut to the part where the answer was named without receiving the preparation that makes the answer fully usable. That choice, the choice to stay through the full truth, is itself the expression of the person I have been describing you as throughout this conversation. It is the expression of the cycle breaker, the one who is willing to receive the full story rather than only the version of it that asks the least of them. I want you to go into the comment section right now, before you take the step, and comment the word ready. Not because the comment is the step, because naming where you are before you take the step is part of the record of the person you are in this moment. The person who arrived here today, who stayed through everything, who received the full truth, who arrived at the moment of decision with complete information. That person is worth naming. Comment ready. Then go to the description. Take the step, and come back and change the comment to done when you have. This is my final word to you in this conversation. Go to the description below. Follow the link. Access the Genius Switch. Begin your 8 minutes today, or first thing when tomorrow arrives. And know that the declaration I made over your life in this conversation is not contingent on what you do with this specific invitation. I declared over you what I declared because it is true about you. The step accelerates it, but the truth of who you are and what you were made for does not depend on the step. What depends on the step is the speed at which the truth of who you are becomes visible in the world. The step is the thing that moves you from carrying the full potential I gave you to expressing the full potential I gave you. And the step is right here, right now. Before tomorrow arrives, go take it.